And we are live. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Pope Metallicus, and welcome to episode 8 of Rock and Roll Religion Live, where we're going to be traveling down the dark side of heavy metal today with the band that started black metal and was a heavy influence on a number of other genres, from thrash all the way to death metal, pretty much all of it that came after them, including some pretty big names. So we're going to go into their first two records, and helping me do that is a friend of mine that I've streamed with before on Nick's channel. You guys might have seen him around on Foulball Productions. Please welcome Imperitus. How's it going, buddy?
Hey, what's going on, man?
Oh, man, it's going good. And, man, we got a topic today.
Oh, yes, we do.
And we have pretty much the two best people for it.
Yeah, I would say so. I think the only person that would probably add to this more so than you and me would probably be 70s.
Yeah, he was around at the time. So
yeah, that's actually a conversation I've been wanting to have with him is what was it like being in the UK at the time when the quote-unquote new wave of British heavy metal was, rocking and rolling, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, that was brand new at the time. So it'd be interesting. We'll have to do that with him one day. We'll have to all get together and do that on somebody's channel.
Yeah, because I just think that'd be an interesting conversation. Because I remember having a conversation with another friend of mine who was an older gentleman who talked about when Pink Floyd albums came out.
Yeah,
like how that impacted the rock and roll scene. And
absolutely. And for those of you haven't guessed or read the description of the video, the band we're talking about today is the immortal Venom. Absolute legends, and this is their classic period too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, their first two records are probably their best. Their later stuff got interesting, but at certain points.
I'm going to say their first three records, because At War with Satan is really good too.
Yeah, that one's really good.
And that's actually the first album I heard from them was that with that track. And I was just like, wow, what the hell is this?
Yeah, especially when you haven't been into the genre before and you don't know what black metal is, or you don't know, especially the lyrical content. You're just blown away. Like, what?
Early teens when I heard it. So,
yeah, so
it was after their peak, so to speak, but it was still, the most quote unquote satanic bands I was listening to at the time would be like King Diamond and Slayer.
Yeah, and both of whom took influences from Venom.
Mm-hmm.
Especially early Slayer, like songs like Black Magic. It's like, dude, you were straight up like listening to Venom 24/7.
Yeah, Show No Mercy was straight up Venom worship.
Yeah, it was just like you guys have been listening to Venom like the last 3 weeks before you recorded this, weren't you?
Which, hey,
it shows they got good taste.
And like you said, this band turned around and essentially jump-started a whole scene.
Yeah, like the darker side and like the more raw side of heavy metal, like whether it be thrash or death or what turned into black metal, didn't really exist before these guys.
Yeah.
Or if it did, it was super underground, like playing in clubs, and that's about it.
Well, if memory serves me correct, didn't they kind of start off as like a punk band?
They did, and they kind of like morphed into this from like 78 to 80, and then they recorded this and just took off with it. And you can tell, I mean, there's a lot of darker punk in here.
Well, that's the thing is, and Kronos has even come out and said over the years, like everything they did was complete tongue-in-cheek, trying to fluster the UK authorities.
And that was the beautiful thing about this is it was basically a troll to because this is the height of the Satanic Panic too, late 70s, early 80s, and everyone else is like, oh no, we don't worship the devil, we're not like that, yada yada, whatever. And then in 1981, these guys come out with an album with a freaking goat's head and a pentagram, and plays it on the album cover
on there,
called "Welcome to Hell."
Between them and Bathory's first album cover with just the goat head.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah. And the funny part was like the reaction from the other bands with like they're all just kind of like scooting away, like,
well,
we're not with these guys.
Quorthon even told the story back in the day that I had read where he was looking to get a drummer for the second album. I think it was
it
something like that?
Either second or third. I think the first two were the same crew.
Right, but he's looking for a drummer for one of the earlier albums, and he plays like the prior album, either the first or the second. He was saying like so many drummers were like, no.
It's just like, nope.
And I don't know if it's because of the lyrical content or just the style as a whole, because in the early to mid 80s, Sweden was not pumping out the metal like they started doing in the 90s.
I mean, that became, Scandinavia became black metal central in like
Not-
1994.
Not even that, like death metal central for a while too, especially
like the more extreme genres, like Scandinavia has been the home of for like 25 years now.
I mean, because when a country has its own sound style for a form of music, Swedish death metal.
That's when you know.
Yeah, and I personally, I've always been a huge fan of that sound.
Yeah, and
the real distorted, crunchy, fuzzy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very raw sound, and they don't take most of it out of the production, which I like. I mean, one of my coworkers at one point, because I used to work in this warehouse, just driving a forklift around, so I'd just be cranking music the whole day and just blasting around. And one of my friends he wasn't a metalhead, but one of the guys I used to work with, like heard like me blasting some Bathory, actually probably Venom too. And eventually he's just like, dude, that sounds like it was recorded in an answering machine inside of a trash can. I'm like, yeah, it's great, right?
And that's when you play some like, Under a Funeral Moon or Panzerfaust Dark.
Oh God, yeah.
Like, this was recorded in an attic.
Yeah, it's like this was recorded in an attic next to a freaking construction site.
Well, I do believe that was actually kind of what happened with one of the Dark Throne albums. I believe they recorded in like one of the guy's parents' attic on a 4-track while they were on vacation.
Yeah,
while the parents were on holiday somewhere.
And it's funny, like when you compare that to another album that was recorded like in a non-professional setting, like Boston's first record.
Right,
it's super produced, really high quality, but it was recorded in Tom Schultz's basement. But that's because Tom Schultz is a brilliant sound engineer and had a complete setup in his basement. These guys probably recorded it literally on like a tape recorder.
Yeah, exactly.
In somebody's attic.
They literally recorded on an analog 4-track in I think it was Nocturnal Culto's parents' attic or something like that while they were gone on vacation.
And the cool thing with these bands, especially, is how young most of them are. Like a lot of the second wave bands, these guys were like 18.
Yeah. That was something like people seen pictures and they're like, and they're looking even with all the corpse paint and everything. They're like, these are a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah.
A lot of the second wave guys
third album. In some cases, I'll be like, yeah, and that's your third album.
Yeah, but a lot of these guys didn't take them. Even the first wave bands didn't take them seriously because of their age.
Yeah, more than likely. That, and I think even the second wave, compared to the first, was that much more over the top.
Well, they kind of had to be because it was the late 80s, early 90s, and metal was kind of passe these days. So and I think a lot of the extreme metal genres kind of did themselves a lot of damage by just going more extreme and more out there.
No, I mean, around that time, like this is around the time, like I graduated in 94.
Yeah.
So I firsthand witnessed the quote unquote death of metal in mainstream.
Yeah, true.
Like I was telling you, out of my class of 1,200, I was the only one who openly admitted to listening to metal, let alone anything underground.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, like in middle school or whatever, like it was all the new metal era, Korn, Slipknot, all those guys. Which don't get me wrong, I like those bands, but they're not anywhere near what Dio, Sabbath, freaking Venom, Dark, Bathory. All those guys. And the thing with the black metal scene, especially, I don't think they cared.
No, they didn't.
I think they wanted, the real purists who were there for the music, which is great. I love. Well,
did you ever see the old? I don't know what exactly you would call it. Maybe I guess you could say it was like the black metal logo that came out after a while. It was a picture of Varg with a circle on the line through him.
Oh yeah,
and it was like no mosh, no core, no trend.
Yeah.
I mean, Varg's an idiot. Don't get me wrong, but I like Burzum.
Burzum is basically, to me, just Bathorism imagery that isn't good.
I don't know. I like some of his more. I don't mean his ambient albums, but I think it's a bit more atmospheric than Bathory was.
Yeah, I will give them that. Their atmospherics are pretty decent, but the musicality itself is basically just. Hey, quicksand kickstand. How you doing, man? Oh, that's Wookiee Supremacy. Hey, Wook.
I mean, for example, for Burzum, I really like the Philosophelm album. Like the first 2 tracks on that are just great music for listening to when it's winter.
Yeah, fair enough. Which makes sense for a Scandinavian band.
You know,
It's cold there a lot.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to a buddy of mine who's into black metal. He's probably listening now. I told him we were going live, and he said he was going to throw it on in the background.
Nice.
He likes his black metal and whatnot, and I made a comment to him about how there's certain bands that just fit better in the winter.
Yeah.
You know, Burzum,
I go
Dark
through different
Throne, so on and so forth. Where like the spring, I tend to listen to spring and summer. I tend to listen to more Summoning and Caladan Brood, and
yeah, there's certain. I mean, even with other metal genres, there's like certain bands I listen to more certain times of the year. I don't know if that's a thing or not, but or if it's just how my musical tastes are going at that point. But
I definitely think it's a thing
yeah,
because certain bands just, no matter how much I like them, there's certain times of the year they just sound better.
yeah, and like different types of music just hit you differently at certain points. Like Venom. Like if I'm just pissed off at the fucking world, I will just throw on Welcome to Hell or black metal and just fucking go.
Yeah, I tend to go more extreme than that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really not more into like the more extreme metal genres. Like I'll listen to it, and the musicality is great, but the vocals just send me out of it. It's weird. I love black metal, but like death metal, I'm not really a big fan of.
I got into death metal before black metal personally, but nowadays you have to be something really special death metal wise for me to really give a shit if you're not one of the classics.
One of the only bands in that genre I've really enjoyed a lot of is my buddy got me into Children of Bodom, and they're pretty
okay. Good. I got into that's definitely a bit more death and doom. Band called Soul Mass. I think they're based out of.
I haven't heard of Soul Mass.
Yeah, they're essentially Dark Souls metal. All their songs are based around, honestly, something to do with Demon Souls or one of the 3 Dark Souls games.
Interesting.
They're actually pretty fucking good. I mean, I get the references because I love those games, but even if I didn't, it'd be musically, I wouldn't say they're incredibly unique death metal, but the overall sound works.
Okay. But like one of the speaking of theme bands, like there's a death metal band out there called Bolt Thrower that is literally all of their lyrics come out of 40K.
I'd say
most of them anyway.
I'd say most. I wouldn't say all. They did some like more historical stuff too.
Yeah, but I mean, their band name is called Bolt Thrower.
Yeah, and they used a couple different album covers that looked like something out of Warhammer. One was absolutely out of Warhammer.
Well, I mean,
what album was that?
I think there's there's multiple different tracks. One's called War Master, obviously about Horus, or Abaddon, whichever one. I like to think Horus because Abaddon's a dick and I hate him.
Right. Cenotaph, I think, is also Warhammer related.
Yep. And there's a whole bunch of it.
World Eater.
Yep. Oh, World Eater's definitely part of it.
Oh, that song is so good too.
I mean, and let's face it, what better legion could you pick for death metal than the freaking World Eaters?
Yeah. I mean, that song too,
the absolute berserkers.
Yeah, the fade in, the brutality of the song to the fade out. That entire 4 or 5 minutes is just
carnage, mayhem, and murder.
Yeah,
which is the World Eaters in a can.
I mean, it was kind of funny back in the day when I played way too much World of Warcraft and I was doing some PvP. I would always have a playlist of just visceral songs. Just visceral. And I remember I was playing with a friend of mine and she could hear my music over my headset and she's like, "What the fuck are you listening to?" Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Then again, I get that reaction pretty much everywhere with the black metal, especially. I think I've told you, and I know I've told Nick, and I'm sure I've told the stories on other streams. I've had people literally stop putting groceries in their car because they can hear what I'm listening to as I pull into a grocery store parking lot. They're like, what?
Like, what is that?
And because what's funny is people always joke around how metal all sounds like X. And black metal, in some cases, would be the prime candidate for that generic comment about, oh, all metal sounds like this, and it's all hail Satan, and blah, blah, blah. Well, funny you should mention that.
Right.
And it's like, this happened like 3 different times. I've also had a priest make the sign of the cross in his car, in a car next to me. And 2 out of those 3 times have absolutely both times been Marduk.
Yeah.
Just hands down. Like, and people just don't know how to react. I mean, it's harsh.
I mean,
It's
we are
brutal.
talking a band where we can't say some of their album titles on YouTube or the stream will get yeeted.
Yeah, I found that out kind of semi the hard way because I was going to hopefully what I'm about to say we won't get yeeted, probably not, but I was going to send in a super chat to Comics Division stream with one of the Culture Casino Weave products.
Oh yeah,
I told Nick about it and I told Toxic Man Flu about it, and they were like, dude, do it. And it was just Culture Casino Hair Care number 666, Fist Fucking God's Weave, brought to you by Marduk off their Panzer Division Weave album.
Nice.
And it wouldn't take it.
Yeah, I bet not.
I don't know why.
There's been a bunch of them I've tried to send. I had to change around.
You know what wouldn't surprise me? I wouldn't be surprised if it was not fucking, but God that got it.
Honestly, it would not shock me. YouTube works these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, like these, and all that shit we were just talking about, it all started with this album right here, Welcome to Hell. And dude, even just right out the gate, as soon as the first track started playing, Sons of Satan, just holy shit. For 1981, everybody who bought this record and when it came out must have just been blown the fuck away.
Well, think about what was out at the time too, especially coming out of the UK.
Yeah, it was all Maiden, Judas Priest.
It was all quote unquote what we would probably call nowadays power metal.
It wasn't power; it was trad heavy. I'd say that trad heavy and to maybe leaning into speed metal a little bit with Saxon and Motorhead. But yeah, I mean, it was. That was all very, and it was more on the rock and roll side of the house.
And you at the time with those bands too, you had more lyrical songs.
Yeah,
where the songs were telling a story or what have you, which is one of the complaints that other musicians and certain fans were giving towards Venom, like, oh, they're lowbrow, blah blah blah.
And even if that was true, which it's not,
right?
I don't care. It's fun.
Well, yeah, but I think that's why they turned around and did At War with Satan the way they did it. Like, oh, you say we can't tell a story, that our songs aren't lyrical? Here you go. It's your 20-minute short story for you.
Yeah, and I think that kind of inspired King Diamond to do what he does.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Kind of the horror themed records. Because he was part of Merciful Fate before he was part of King Diamond, and Merciful Fate took a lot of influence from these guys too.
These guys, as like I said, 70s wants to do a show about the gods of metal. These guys are one of the gods. Maybe they're more one of the gods of the underground.
Well, they're maybe one of the chaos gods, but they're one of the gods anyway.
But like at this era, you had these guys. You had Bathory from Sweden. You had Hellhammer / Celtic Frost out of Switzerland.
Yeah,
and
they wouldn't even be discovered until really discovered until the 90s.
Yeah,
they kind of languished in the underground for a while. At least Hellhammer did.
Yeah, Hellhammer did for sure. But Celtic Frost started getting a little popular, and then they let it go to their head, and then they put out Cherry Orchards.
Yeah,
we don't talk about that.
I was going to say we'll just leave that over there in the trash where it belongs.
So
but yeah, man, like this, but like the first two records, especially like Sons of Satan, or the first two tracks, especially Sons of Satan and freaking Welcome to Hell.
Hell, yeah.
I kind of wish they'd flip the track order on that one, because Welcome to Hell I think fits as the opener a little better.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But I think they were going for that auditory shock of Sons of Satan, where it's just loud, bombastic, and in your face from second one.
Yeah, more than likely. I mean,
that fits with that kind of punk mentality that they had.
And this album had so many other good tracks too.
Dude, like Schizoid, Poison,
Witching Hour,
Witching Hour is one of my favorites.
In League with Satan. I can't tell you how many times that song's been covered, right along with Welcome to Hell and black metal.
Yep. And like almost Live Like an Angel, like most of this track is just fantastic. 1,000 Years in Sodom.
And that's just it. Like a lot of it's kind of weird, because if you take a modern day pure black metal album, some of these song titles would not be on here.
Yeah.
Red Light Fever, probably not. Angel Dust, probably not. Poison, Mayhem with Mercy maybe, but Poison and Schizo, no. They would be replaced with more, again, satanic fare.
Yeah, whereas this wasn't like just purely about, the devil and all that. It was all about just living that life and just partying hard and doing everything you wanted to do.
And as you said earlier, being shocking as well.
Yeah, that was the other part. I think that they had even more in mind, was just absolute freaking insanity and shock. Hey, Sentinel. How's it going, man? Yo, dude, if you're not on Gilded, go to that link in the description. I want to talk to you about a record that I want to do with you. So hit me up, dude. But yeah, man, like this first record was just an absolute atom bomb at the time.
Oh yeah.
And just kind of like everyone just kind of looked at it in shock of just like, what is that?
I wouldn't be surprised if this was one of the original artists that gave rise to the whole heavy metal is just satanic music.
I think this and a lot of the stuff that came later with like Dark Throne, all those guys.
Well,
Mayhem.
When Mayhem and Dark Throne came about, that trope had already been established.
Yeah, so I think maybe Bathory and maybe Celtic Frost were responsible for a lot of it.
They even lumped Ozzy Osbourne into that.
Yeah, although they tried to say that with Black Sabbath too.
Yeah, so I mean that was a thing. It's like, oh well, if you talk about Satan, you're satanic.
I was gonna say, and especially reading the lyrics on some of the early Sabbath stuff, like After Forever actually has kind of an evangelical message.
Well, yeah. Then you look at somebody like a band like Slayer. They get into some dark topics: war, death, Satanism, etc., etc. And Tom Araya is a devoted Catholic.
Oh yeah, and
so
I think the entire band is.
No, they're not.
No,
I know.
I knew Tom was.
Yeah, Tom is. I think the rest are. I don't know about anybody else because Slayer to me now is just Tom Araya and Kerry King since Jeff passed away, and their drummer's been in rotation, so to speak.
Yeah, I was gonna say Dave hasn't been there in a long time, and I don't even know who their drummer is now.
The last I knew was Paul Bostaff, and that was years ago.
Yeah, I think they are actually retired now.
Yeah, I believe they are.
They finally finished that farewell tour that lasted 2 tours.
Yeah, and they were using Gary Holt from Exodus for a while,
which I don't mind. I like Gary Holt a lot.
And I got the pleasure of seeing. I want to say it was Testament.
Ooh.
That had Paul Bostaff playing.
That sounds like a good lineup.
I remember seeing like Paul Bostaff, playing drums on some smaller band that wasn't Slayer, and all anybody wanted to talk to him about was Slayer. And I made some comment to him about some like other band he was in. He's like, "Come over here and stand with me for a while, will you?"
Yeah, right.
And he's like, "I'm just getting tired of talking about Slayer all night." And I could kind of understand that.
Yeah, because I mean, don't get me wrong, it's the biggest band you were a part of, and it's part of your career. But that's the past. When we want to talk about what I'm doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like save the past for the days when we can't play anymore and we're writing our memoirs.
Yeah, I mean, I got lucky in the area of New York I grew up in that there was a place here with about half hour or so from me that used to book just anything metal that came through. They booked.
Nice.
And they certainly stopped that for whatever reason.
Yeah, the venues that'll actually do like small metal shows are fewer and farther between.
Yeah, like this place now.
As time goes on,
if it isn't like a Metal Blade or Nuclear Blast tour, or have at least a couple like quote unquote established bands in it, this venue won't even pick them up anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I will say Nuclear Blast has a hell of a lineup now.
Yeah, it's kind of funny thinking about that.
They've absolutely got some absolute monsters on there. Sabaton's one of theirs.
Well, that's just it. I mean, out of all the major metal labels, Roadrunner went by the wayside.
Yeah, Roadrunner's gone. Kerrang's pretty much gone.
Yep. Well, Kerrang was a zine.
Yeah, I thought they did produce a couple records, though, back in the 80s.
No, that was, I want to say that was a different fanzine, and it was with Hammerheart Records.
Okay.
I think. I could be wrong on that.
I was just say, I thought Kerrang at least talked about doing it, but
they might have.
But then again, I wasn't around back then, so I have no idea. I'm just going on from back in the day.
I never really heard that, so I don't recall either way.
And especially like the history of some of the metal bands in the 80s, it's like the mother of all unreliable narrators.
Yeah.
Because like everybody's got beef with each other now, and
Well,
this band doesn't like that one.
Well, we saw that even in the 90s in the Scandinavian black metal scene. Like the Norwegian bands didn't like some of the Swedish bands, who didn't like the Polish bands, and so on, and then round and round it went.
Yeah. And that's even not even taking into account, the guy that used to be in this band, but then got in a fight with the singer and then left. And then this guy punched their drummer one time.
As a buddy of mine said a while back, he's like, the Scandinavian black metal scene is so damn incestuous. It's funny.
Well, it's partly because it's such, heavy metal in general, it's such a small community. Everybody knows everybody.
Right.
Like everybody, like you'll see guys pop up in bands that it's just like, wait, you were in this band before. Oh, now you're over here.
Well, yeah, then you'd have super groups, for every so once in a while would pop up, like the first Borknagar album.
Yeah, and you almost never see them last long.
Well, that's one of the ones that did, but it's some of them last, some of them didn't. But like the first Borknagar was one of the ones that lasted. Zyklon B started off as a super group. I think they're still around. I think they call themselves Zyklon now, and they took off the B part.
I was gonna say I haven't heard them in a while, but they might be.
I want to say their very first album had Isan and Samoth from Emperor in it.
That would be interesting. Emperor was great.
And like, the first Borknagar album,
when I was first getting into black metal, like I started with Venom and Bathory, and then my buddy was in a black metal band called Ashen Wings at the time. I'm like, hey, you know this shit. Who should I start listening to? He just hands me an Emperor album. Goes, here you go.
Yeah, they were one of the first black metal bands I heard and got into. Another one was Dissection. Yeah, Immortal was one of the early ones. Believe it or not, like a couple of the first early ones I actually got into as well were both Burzum and Darkthrone. So,
well, that was fairly recent at the time too.
Yes and no. I started getting into black metal around 97, 98.
Okay, so this would have been more towards like 91, 94, that area.
Yeah, like the first Darkthrone album I heard was A Blaze in the Northern Sky. And that had definitely been out for a while at that point. And then the first Burzum record was Detsom Engang Var.
Yeah, but like when you talk about like all of these bands, like all of them came from this point.
Mm-hmm.
And like this is the one that started everything. And it's not often in music you can listen, you can just point at one band and go, that's them, officer, right there. They're the ones responsible for all of this. But they really are.
Yeah, that is.
I think Hellhammer was sort of around at this time as well.
Well, let's take a look.
I think they were. I don't think they had recorded anything yet, but I think they were around.
Gotta make sure I specify that properly so I don't get the drummer. They were started in 82.
Okay, so they started just after this.
Yeah, they ran 82 to 84.
Okay, so they were just after this.
Mm-hmm.
And probably concurrent with the next album we're going to talk about.
They were also, I wouldn't be surprised though if they were, maybe putzing around in a garage with each other. Or
like bands like that, it's hard to tell like when they actually started doing what they do, because they might have just been a garage band or played clubs or something like that, and nobody really knew who they were.
Yeah, because it just says in Wikipedia, we're active. Well, what the hell do you mean by active? Are they out playing gigs? Are they out? What are they doing?
Yeah, and I was going to say, Wikipedia doesn't say they're still active, do they?
No. It says 82 to 84. Celtic Frost is done too.
I was going to say, because even Celtic Frost isn't around anymore.
Yeah, Tom Warrior now does Triptychon.
Yep. Which, they're not bad.
That's all right. The first album was pretty good.
But a lot of this stuff, like going into the next one, like this one was just, I think, really just heavy punk. And they were just kind of going nuts on it and seeing what stuck.
There is
people really gravitated towards the more satanic stuff.
I think there was also on this album though too. You had the beginnings of certain thrash riffs.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Welcome to Hell is
Mhm.
certainly one that stuck around. I would say Sons of Satan as well.
Yeah,
Got copied quite a bit, and
I
certainly
mean,
some of the thrash sound and attitude.
and like the mid pace of In League with Satan.
Yep,
That's been copied a lot too.
yep.
Not quite that slow, doomy, Sabbathy kind of sound, but that not quite speed metal, but not quite doom either. That mid pace.
Yeah, it's got like the feel of like that oppressive feel of doom metal, but it has the pace of a speed metal track.
Kind of.
So it's kind of got both ends, and that's ended up being what thrash ends up sounding like. When you mash Black Sabbath and Motorhead together, what you get is, well, Venom.
Yeah, with
And
better
that's probably where their sound came from. It's
and
probably a
with
mixture
better
of
fashion sense.
Fair.
Because have you seen some of the old pictures of Sabbath?
Yeah.
Wow, drugs were a hell of a thing in the 70s.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the 1970s were pretty much a fashion tragedy anyway.
This is true.
So like, that didn't help, and the attire was certainly just oof. All the tassels and shit like that. It's just like, what are you guys doing? But yeah, man, this record I think is more of a statement of intent than anything else. It is one of their better records, and I think it stands the test of time. It still holds up really, really well. And I think that there's a reason this started a whole musical movement. And let's check in with the chat, see what you guys got to say. We got quickstand kickstand here. That one's going to be tough for me to say. And the Sentinel. How's it going, you two? And we've got, let's see here. Let's see if I can't bring up. No, I can't. All righty.
And it's just funny too how it's almost every genre does this, in my opinion. And correct me if I'm wrong. You can disagree or what have you. But they always start off punch you in the face, harsh and brutal. And then after a number of years, it's like, oh, hey, look, now we're adding all sorts of like melody.
Yeah.
Melodic death metal was not a thing for at least a good number of years after death metal kind of came around.
Probably the late 80s, early 90s is when you first started hearing it.
No, I was going to go. It was definitely early 90s because the late 80s, there really wasn't much yet. You had Death, you had Cannibal Corpse, Massacre, Possessed, if you want to call them death metal. Yeah. That's actually somebody I need to reach out to. I actually followed Jeff on Facebook.
No, cool.
So, maybe I might be able to drag him into one of these at some point.
No, and then you have all the black metal stuff that came out of this as well.
And again, what's even funnier is how much black metal started as death metal.
Yeah, or all three of those have kind of morphed into each other at a certain point.
Yeah, for sure.
The best example of that being Sodom.
Yeah.
They started out as straight up black metal and ended up turning into more of a thrash band. And I love both of it.
Yeah. Because Dark Throne, again, first album, death metal.
Yeah.
Pure Scandinavian style death metal.
Yeah. And then they went a little more on the darker side for their next couple.
Yeah. But it was black metal, but it had death metal riffs.
Yeah. Which there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, for sure. I believe Immortals started off as a death metal band.
Yeah.
The band Hades Almighty. I hate that. They used to be just called Hades. They started as a death metal band as well.
Okay.
And I believe two of the guys, I believe the band was, I forgot what the band was called. It might have been Molested. Could be wrong. But it had two of the guys from Hades and Varg in it.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. Weird how it all.
Well, Varg just kind of bounces around between bands. Everyone ends up hating him.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because he's just an absolute freaking lunatic.
I don't think he hit his lunatic stage at that point yet. I think he was just an arrogant prick.
Oh, okay. So, different type of asshole.
Yeah, well, from what I've heard, a couple of the guys in the scene did not do themselves any favors. Like, for a long time, people used to give Satir from Satyricon a bunch of shit because his family's rich.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you borrowed money from your parents to buy, to start a label and to fund your band. Meanwhile, it's like, who cares how they do it as long as they're doing it.
As long as they're doing it, yeah. Although that started that real black metal purist era, and those fans are the douchiest people I've ever met. Where it's like, oh, if it's not like this specific type of black metal that I listen to, then it ain't shit. It's not extreme enough. And it's like, dude, go away.
Yeah, I'm a purist, but not like that. Like, I remember actually a couple weeks, not this week, but last week, I was on Foulball's channel on his, the MF or Cocktail Lounge, and Comics was there, and we were all talking music. Me, him, Foulball, 70s, Red Shirt. It was a great music conversation. And I made a comment about there being hipster black metal.
Oh yeah,
and if you just heard the perplexed sound come out of Comics, he's like, "Wait, what?
What?"
I was like, "And guess where it all comes from?" He's like, "Oh, I have an idea, but do tell me." I was like, "Portland."
Yep.
He's like, "Oh, of course."
It's like it's always the one you think it is. Don't get me wrong. The East Coast leftists are just as annoying in different ways, but there's something about like the smug douchery that comes out of Portland and Seattle that's just its own brand.
Like I was friends with the singer from the American black metal band Krieg.
Okay.
And he played a show out there in Portland area, I guess. And I remember talking to him like, "Oh, how was it?" He was like, "It was knit hats and horn-rimmed glasses as far as the eye could see." I'm like, "How is that a fucking black metal show then?"
Yep.
Where's the leathers and spikes and long hair and
yeah. I mean, like I get it from those guys because. Like, I'm not only into black metal. Like, my favorite band's Judas Priest. I listen to a lot of the power and speed metal stuff. Like, that's mostly where I live. But I also appreciate the darker stuff. But a lot of these the real hipster douchebags are just like, "Oh, well, it's either black metal or nothing." It's like, no, go away. It's like that's why everyone is kind of staying away from that side of the scene.
Well, and what they're doing isn't fucking black metal.
Yeah,
they're wearing black metal as a fucking skin suit in my opinion.
Musically it has some of the hallmarks of it, kinda, and then it's really just satanic thrash metal.
It's not even that. It's not even satanic thrash metal. It's just they're trying to copy the sound, but without the atmosphere, without the lyrical content, without the passion. Because for those in the audience who don't know, black metal is a subgenre of underground metal, usually tends to be more on the lo-fi side of recording, tends to be, not exclusively, but tends to be hyper satanic. But it came about because, and it's funny how some of these bands come about. I'll mention another band later or after this. They were saying, if you go and read old interviews with some of what's considered the godfathers of the second wave of black metal bands like Emperor, Mayhem, Immortal, Marduk, Burzum, Darkthrone, etc. A lot of them were coming out and saying, and even some of the more death metal bands that strayed into the darker lyrical content and not like the war and death and gore lyrics, they were tired of going to a metal show and have the band come out in like shorts and a t-shirt. Where's the stage presence? Where's the atmosphere?
That was a thing in like the late 90s and into the 2000s where like even the real like death metal bands and shit like that, there was no leather, there was no freaking costumes. It was literally just a dude in like camouflage cargo shorts and a freaking tank top.
Right. And before, and the thing too is like even before all that happened, you had like the thrash metal uniform, jeans, a band shirt, and white Reebok high tops.
Yep.
So at least you had some sort of like, they
And
looked
probably
like,
a battle jacket or something.
yeah, and they looked like the people in the crowd.
Yeah.
Or the crowd looked like the band. And then while that was cool, especially during the thrash era, death metal, it's like, dude, why are you wearing like a pair of surf shorts?
Right? It's like if I go to a show,
I get it's hot on stage. I've been on stage before. It's fucking hot.
Yeah, it's
but
fucking brutal, but
at the same time, suffer for your craft, motherfucker.
Yeah, it's just like, guess what? You wanted to do this. You wanted to be in the band, so
it's kind of hard to do. Not that I would take any metal band seriously, but if you want people to kind of give you any sort of like serious recognition, you turn around and look the part.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's like, especially for like even like the trad heavy bands, like even the crowd is showing up wearing leather jackets and all that kind of stuff, and we're going to be in a mosh pit in about 5 seconds. At least freaking show up and have some and have some freaking pride in your stage presence.
Have your body armor on, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, and nobody's saying you have to be Iron Maiden or Ghost where you put on this huge elaborate stage show. That's awesome. It's also really expensive, and that all comes out of the band's cut.
Right.
So,
but at least
or like Sabaton, where they have a literal fucking tank.
Yeah. I mean, if you're gonna play a certain style of music, at least make an attempt to look the part.
And if you're not going to look the part, look like every other band doing it, at least come up with a new and interesting costume that makes you unique. Like Ghost is a perfect example of that.
I went to a gig a number of years ago, and Swallow the Sun was opening. Good Finnish doom band, one of the very few doom bands I actually like. They all looked like they were going to go play a fucking round of golf.
Jesus Christ.
They're wearing like polo shirts and shit. I'm like, this?
Yeah, it's just like a complete non sequitur. Just like, how are you a metal band?
Yeah. I don't think a single one of them had long hair either, but that's kind of common, I've noticed, especially in like the old school Finnish bands. There's always one or two dudes that just had short hair.
I mean, in my case, I can't, but
well,
because I wear the mohawk for 2 reasons. One, it looks good, and second, I'm losing my hair on the sides. Can't have a widow's peak if the sides aren't there.
This is true. That's a good way to look at it.
But and like that's the thing. Like everyone likes to joke and shit about the unofficial uniform of the metal band and stuff like that. But it's like that's just the look of the scene. Like, and you don't have to look like you want to fit in, but it helps.
And it comes back to Venom, because they had the look with leather pants and jeans and leather vests and biker jackets. And
at one point,
vests and spikes and upside down
there's
crosses.
There's a picture of one of the early records. I think it's the next one. That when they were doing the live tour for it, where Kronos is out there in a leather thong, and that's about it.
Yeah. Again, shock value more than anything else there, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And,
that or he was really drunk.
That's also a likely explanation.
Or both.
That's probably exactly what happened. It's just, fuck it. Let's do this thing.
Yeah. Like I said, it's hot on stage.
Yep, it is. And that's one way to cool off. I do not want to smell what that smelled like after the show, though.
Nah, no.
That's just like,
sweaty leather is not a pleasant smell.
Nope. I think I've been in a locker room after a hockey game. No, thank you. But no, moving into this next record, because this one is just like, it was an absolute seismic shift in the heavier metal, or the darker
just
side
metal
of metal
in general.
Yeah, because like before that, there was no extreme metal or anything like that. Like, this is before that even existed.
Yeah, before this, like you said, you had Iron Maiden had what, 2 albums out at this point?
This is 81, so Killers came out this year.
Yeah,
so this is their second record.
Right.
Priest had been around for a while, and so had Sabbath.
Yeah, but I still think Priest was still doing more of their hard rock.
This would have been a year after British Steel came out.
Okay.
So this would have been a contemporary of Point of Entry.
Okay. Sabbath was done at this point, I believe.
No,
as far as
Dio era, this was Dio era Sabbath.
Right. Okay. So this was not one of their high.
This would have been a contemporary of the Mob Rules.
Oh, okay.
So this would have been the second Dio album. So but just give you guys a view of what everyone else was doing at the time.
Show No Mercy was 2 years after this.
Yep.
Kill 'Em All, I think, was like 2 or 3 years after this.
2, I think. Might be 3.
I'm trying to think of what else was out at the time, metal wise.
I can't remember if that came out in 83 or 84.
And we hadn't even hit the era of the hair bands yet either.
Nope. I mean, and in terms of influences on Metallica, Diamond Head had just started 2 years before this with Am I Evil, and that was kind of more the darker side of heavy metal at the time.
Yeah.
Because that came out in what, 78, 79?
Let me look that up so I don't sound like a retard.
I think I know it's one of the two, but it was like that was considered like these guys are getting into some dark topics here. Not knowing that this was just over the horizon.
1980 was when Am I Evil came out. So Am I Evil was a year before this.
Okay. So like you can kind of see like some tendencies towards that, like trying to play more with with lyrical style, but it sounded nothing like this.
There's always been bands that have had a darker side.
Blue Oyster Cult's similar to that.
Yeah, even the Rolling Stones had a couple darker tracks. Then you had a band, Coven.
Yep.
They kind of came out and definitely used a bit more of the occult or satanic imagery and topics in their songs, but they were more of a psychedelic rock band, if memory serves me right.
And sonically, probably the closest thing I could see to this that came out before it is probably either like Overkill or Ace of Spades by Motorhead.
Yeah. I mean, if anybody was, but they were probably considered some form of punk. I don't think
according to Lemmy, they were rock and roll. They were never a metal band.
But that's just it. I don't think there was any terms at the time. Like speed metal hadn't become a term yet.
Yeah, there was
certainly metal wasn't a term yet.
There was certainly nobody playing or nobody that could call it that. I mean, it took like 3 or 4 years for heavy metal to come out of rock.
Yeah.
I mean, and Priest was the first one to claim the title, but Sabbath invented the sound.
And even like death metal didn't become a quote unquote genre until like the first Death record and then Possessed with Seven Churches. They came out around like 84, 85, 86, somewhere in that range.
Yeah. So I think they both kind of split off from these guys right here. And I think that shows in the early output of a lot of the thrash bands and almost every single one of the death metal bands.
Right.
And I think a lot of when that all came out had to do with this next album right here.
Oh, yeah.
Black metal. Probably Venom's finest hour. And
yeah,
certainly most people's route into this band.
I mean, like I said, the first album I heard was At War with Satan. And then once that album was done, my buddy's like, here, now check this out.
Yeah. And that's kind of cool too, is to come at it from the back end and like see how they got to where you started, and kind of see the album devolved.
You could kind of see where they were coming from. Maybe not so much where they were coming from, but like
how it evolved going forward.
Yeah, it was just I always kind of enjoyed like hearing maybe getting into a band in one of their later albums and then going back and going, so that's how they started.
Yeah,
that's what they.
And a lot of them, some of their first albums are not very good. Like I'm the biggest Judas Priest fan on this planet.
Rock-a-Rolla is not a good album.
No, it's not a bad rock album. It's just not Judas Priest.
Correct. Right.
It has none of their sonic hallmarks. I don't even know if all 5 of them were in the band yet.
I honestly don't know. I'm not the hugest of Priest fans.
I think Glenn was already in there, but I might be wrong on that. And it certainly sounded nothing like Sad Wings of Destiny or anything that came later.
It's.
But they kind of built that sound as they were going.
One of the things that I can attribute to this album having a big hand in creating black metal was or just extreme metal in general, how that is such a worldwide thing.
Yeah.
There's black and death metal bands from just about every goddamn country out there. And some of you be sitting there going, wait, what?
Yeah, there's black and death metal bands from all over the place. I mean,
Taiwan, Indonesia, Singapore, Israel, Iran, Mexico.
Iran surprises me.
Yeah.
I'm guessing those guys don't want themselves identified in any way, shape, or form.
No, they do, but they're real kind of hush-hush about things. Like they don't draw too much attention to themselves.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet it's the same in those as it is for like a lot of more traditional countries, where as long as the scene doesn't really go out of its way to draw attention to themselves, everyone's just kind of content to let it slide.
Yeah, I think also too, as long as they're not ridiculing Islam in any way,
yeah,
they're probably fine as far as that goes. But I'm sure they're still looked at as decadent Western.
Yeah, either that or just filthy degenerates.
Yeah.
But
hell,
like, as long as they're kind of stay to their own little corner, everyone's good.
Yeah. Hell, I even told you one of the bands I've listened to lately came out of a Native American reservation.
Yeah, that's cool as hell.
Dude, they're fucking so good.
I would love to hear some Native American black metal. That's
go listen
awesome.
Go listen to Black Braid. They only have 2 tracks out right now, but the one Barefoot Ghost Dance on Blood-Soaked Ground. Oh my god, it's so good.
I'm gonna make a note of that right now.
That's what I've been telling you about.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
It's got the sonic hallmarks of a lot of the newer style of Finnish black metal, like Sargeist and Satanic Warmaster and Horna and bands like that. But they do some cool shit too. Like the drums at one point actually gives an impression of like a galloping horse or like feet dancing on a ground.
Nice. And especially with a drum track, there's so many Native American styles of drums and percussion that you could add into that.
Oh, which
is something I've loved about a lot of the stuff you see from like other countries, is that they're adding like their own culture's little twist onto metal, and it sounds brilliant in a lot of cases. Like I was listening to a band, I forget the name of them. They popped up on my little playlist from India. And they added some of the traditional Indian styles in there, like a sitar and stuff like that.
It sounds like fucking great. Was it like Bloodywood or something like that?
I'd have to look him up again.
The singer's a real large, not fat, but like large guy.
Yeah,
and like the guitarist is bald.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's Bloodywood or something like that. Yeah, they're not bad. As I mentioned to you before, I'm also a huge fan of folk metal.
Yeah,
and some of it, and not that long ago, I was going somewhere with my dad to do something, help him out with something, and I was driving, and I was like, I wonder how he'll react to this, and I played the Who for him.
Oh
the Mongolian Who.
Yeah, the Mongolian Who. Everybody,
and even he was like,
rock band. But I'm sure he's heard that before.
Yeah, but he was like, this is incredibly interesting.
Yeah, no. First time I heard it, it's like, oh yeah, it's like Mongolian, it's like traditional metal. I'm like, interesting. And
but my feeling is like with the folk metal, be it the Who or
even some of the Scandinavian folk stuff, like Wardruna and stuff like that. It's great.
It stirs something in me.
Oh yeah,
it's triggers some sort of primal, and maybe it's because my family's from that part of the world, Scandinavia, and there's some,
Well, yeah, it's the same thing as hearing
ancestral memory.
Hearing bagpipes for me, it's just
right. Yay. Maybe some sort of ancestral memory or something like that.
Oh, probably
it stirs.
But I will go. I got to go for 1 minute. I'll be right back.
Right. So let me see. So folk metal, for those who don't know, I'll give a little bit of a rundown. Is your more traditional heavy metal, sometimes leaning more towards death metal or black metal or some other form of extreme metal, but they'll then turn and use melodies, instruments that are more folk sounding. The band from Finland, Korpiklani, they have a fiddle player and an accordion player, and they use them a lot. And it's whoever would have thought an accordion would make for a great metal instrument. Another band that I dig is actually kind of folk metal-y from Japan called what are they called? That's the Wagaki band. Sorry. Called Wagaki band, and they'll use traditional Japanese instruments like Japanese harp, Japanese banjo, which is known as a shamisen, Japanese flute, but it incorporates more heavier styles to it with those instruments as well. So it's a nice little hybrid, is the best way to put it. Some other bands in the folk. And even folk metal gets broken down into so many separate subgenres. It's enough to make you want to bang your head against the desk until you see pretty lights. You got, a Monomarth, which is Viking metal. Same with Enslaved, which is Viking metal. You have Cruachan from Ireland, which is Celtic folk metal. You have Ailstorm, which is pirate metal.
Oh, the whole pirate metal genre is fucking hilarious because none of them take themselves seriously in the least.
No, they don't. The only one I really like though is Ailstorm. I wasn't really a fan of Swashbuckled at all.
I mean, I still think that "Fucked with an Anchor" should be the new Navy anthem.
Dude, that song is
it's just such great. A fun song.
Like a buddy of mine comes over, and I had something up on my monitor, and I think it was his Windows Media Player, and he's like, and he's known me for years, so he knows that most of the stuff I listen to is not for the same.
Not the stuff you'll hear on the radio.
No, not at all. And he's like, "Fucked with an Anchor," and I played it for him, and he's just looking at me like, really? I'm like, yeah, well, you know.
Hey, Janet, Amber, thank you guys so much for joining us, chat. We're having a great time. We hope you are too. And
there's nothing better than hearing a bunch of people who enjoy music sit down and talk about the music they enjoy.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I said it the 70s not too long ago. This reminds me of the old days when you just go into the record store, hang out, and talk.
I got lucky with my area just with exactly that. There's a store down here by me called Rock Fantasy.
Dude, like I wish there was a record store around me that was like around still, like because we used to have Tower Records over in Burlington. I used to go to all the time.
Right,
but that closed in the early 2000s, and other than that, Newbury Comics has some albums around, and that's about it.
Yeah, this place has been around since the late 80s. Combination head shop, metal shop, you know.
Gee, it's funny how those two go together, isn't it?
Yeah, and I got lucky during the late 90s. Early 2000s, a couple of guys from Morpheus Descends and Typhus and Fog, you know, two guys split over 3 bands, were running their distro out of this store.
Nice.
And they'd be working there and blah, blah, blah. And I'd go in and hang out with them like once, twice a week. They'd be like, "Oh, check this out. Oh, we just got this in. Check this out." And They turned me on. They were pretty much my education into like black metal and, you know, some death metal stuff I'd never heard of before because it was seriously underground.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how I got into it. I was never really a fan, and then my buddy Devin, who was the guitarist from Ashen Wings for a while, he got me into it. Like I'd heard Venom and I kind of liked it. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm just kind of like figuring out which ends up on this one. And then I got into Bathory through Razor Fist Mythos on them because I know I heard him ranting about them for years, and I typically have very similar taste to him musically. So I'm like, you know what? If he likes it, I might as well give it a shot and see what I like. And
I appreciate a lot of his takes, and a lot of at the same time, some of his takes just make me sit there and shake my head. Like, really, dude? Really? Yeah, all right, whatever.
Oh, like me and him disagree vehemently on Riot City. It's a newer NWO THM band coming out of Canada. It's just absolutely phenomenal. They only have one record, but it's well worth a watch.
With him too, it's not even music. Sometimes his video game takes just make me go, oh.
He does
painful.
He is. I think he says some of it just to piss people off, though.
I think so, but at the same time, I saw something the other day, and this made me laugh hard. And I was at work when I saw this, so people were looking at me strange. He's sitting there going, he made some comment again about how fuck Elden Ring, FromSoft should just make another Tenchu game. And someone made a comment like, yeah, Elden Ring sold 14 million copies. That's 4 million more than Tenchu over its lifespan.
Oof.
And he was just like, he's like, yeah, it makes me wonder why they're not doing another Tenchu game, huh? Yeah, that did not go over well at all. But I was just like, oh, that hurts. That hurts.
That's just one of those like, oh, from the top rope.
Yeah. Ooh, God.
But hey, everyone's wrong sometimes, and you need to learn to just kind of.
And the funny thing is, I've said this to other people that I know in the metal scene and other gamers that Dark Souls is the black metal of video games.
Yeah, it's the one that a lot of hipsters claim to like, and only the real fans really do. I don't claim to like it. I've never been a PlayStation owner. I've never really.
It's on PC as well.
Yeah, but like even the gameplay that I've seen, it just doesn't seem like my kind of thing. I like a lot more like narrative and like story-driven games. Like Kingdom Come Deliverance, I absolutely fucking adore it.
Okay, yeah. I mean, these are the Soulsborne games are story-driven. They just do it in a more of an old school way.
Okay. And
There's
I'll
a big
probably I'll probably get into them at some
but
point.
it's because
just...
the atmosphere. It's the atmosphere is what makes it black metal. It's
yeah,
oppressive
it's
and
dark
and
and filled
nothing
with
good
death
happens to anybody ever in those
I
games.
I will say one thing I find very, very amusing about that game is the chest monsters.
Fuck those things.
Because it's just like gamers from like a young age are just programmed. Ooh, chest, that means something good.
Yeah.
Run right over. Nom.
Well, as you're a bit of a tabletop player, this is something you can appreciate. Another way I've described the Soulsborne games to people is like old school D&D.
Yeah.
Where the littlest thing can fucking kill you.
Yup. Like if the dice roll the wrong way, you're in trouble.
Yeah. Oh, it's a giant rat. That's no big deal. Yeah, that's what it's not no big deal in any other video game.
Yeah,
but
like,
I've had my ass kicked by giant rats in the Soulsborne games more than enough.
Yeah, it's like I mean, I know you're a BattleTech fan as well. I mean, and by the way, Tex just dropped his video on the Warhammer, and it's fantastic.
Nice.
And the Warhammer is my favorite mech, so I was just like, this is like crack to me. I need to watch it.
When's that new DLC coming out? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's going to be good.
Yeah,
adding melee weapons in. Unfortunately we don't get the Axeman because it's too early. Because the narrative for
they'll get modded in.
Oh, I guarantee it will be. Because it really is my favorite mech. The favorite one I'm able to play anymore is the Warhammer. But which I love what they did to the look of the new mechs. Like when they overhauled the look of the mechs, because I disagree very heavily with Razor on this one. That like they used to look like 80s sci-fi robots, and that was cool and all. I like the aesthetic of a lot of them, but these are industrial war machines. They are meant to be mass produced and put onto a battlefield.
Right. I agree with his take though too.
No, I do say
because they're supposed to be relics of a bygone era. They should be beat up in older tech. Well, I heard him say one time on one of his streams, he's like, they're long forgotten relics of the past. He's like, they're not fucking Gundams being made then and there.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the same time, too, if you look around some of the cockpits in these things, like the Corsair is one of my favorites because it literally has something hooked together with jumper cables.
Yeah, right. There's that, and you got ones that look like, what is it, the Mad Cat? It's actually like a B-52 cockpit.
No, it's actually a B-29 cockpit.
Okay.
But that's I mean, and those are produced right at the time. Those are clan mechs. And like a lot of these things are family heirlooms and stuff like that. So I do like how they look a little beat up, but I also like how the newer ones are all squared off and very industrial looking. So they're designed to be mass produced in large numbers.
Right.
Because these designs, I mean, look at the Warhammer. It debuted 500 years before the beginning of the tabletop game. So these things have been around a long time. And some of the mechs they updated, and mechs I used to hate, I now love.
Right.
Like the Centurion. I used to hate the Centurion so much. It looked so goofy and so like just generic 80s robot that I couldn't stand it.
Yeah, I can't really, as being a fan of Gundam and I build Gunpla and so on and so forth, I can't really talk about goofy aesthetics.
Yeah, that's true. And some of the Gundam series get a little out there. But
feathered wings on a mech? Sure, why not?
Yeah, that happened. But
it did.
And it looked great, but the new Centurion just looks freaking beefy and massive, just like it's supposed to. It's a trooper mech.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be. That's why you're seeing like life-size statues of Gundams being built in Japan and not like life-size mech warrior mechs somewhere else. Because
although if we ever get battle mechs on the field, like in real life, I will re-enlist in a freaking heartbeat. Like, give me my mech.
But you're 80. I don't care. I'll take the cybernetic treatments I want in the goddamn mech.
Yeah, it's like you have no idea how long I've been waiting for this. Shut up and give me my Warhammer.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, like this album, I think was the one that pushed it over the edge. Everyone was kind of paying attention with Welcome to Hell. I think this one is where a lot of guys drove down the rabbit hole and were just like, this is fucking awesome. I want in.
Yeah, this also cemented more of their thrash sound.
Yeah, like including black metal itself.
Mm-hmm.
Black metal, or Don't Burn the Witch.
Raise the Dead.
Very heavily Raise the Dead.
In this one, they definitely leaned more towards the satanic side of things.
Yeah, and I think
just the shock value.
I think they may have done that because like the fan input really like latched onto that, and that's
because the only track that isn't some sort of religion reference or satanic reference is Teacher's Pet.
And that one is just offensive as all hell.
Oh yeah,
That's one of those ones. Like I played it once at work, and my boss was like, "Dude, I give you a lot of leeway, but no."
no, yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah." I was just like, "Yeah, fair enough."
But you know,
oh man,
black metal to hell
and
and
I love how
back.
their Teacher's Pet especially has a lot of different stuff musically from them.
Mhm.
You hear a lot of that blues riff in the background, especially with the bass.
Right.
At certain points in the song, it's just like ooh, and that's also kind of a thrashier riff too.
Yeah, it certainly is.
It's hard to describe until you hear the song.
Yeah. I mean,
I am not playing that song on this channel.
No, I don't blame you.
I don't want to get my channel yeeted.
This is
They said before I hit a year.
Yeah. This album also had like almost like a war cry for the metal scene. Lay down your soul for the gods.
Oh god, yeah, that is single handedly one of the best freaking chorus lines in metal history.
And it just he yells that out, and it just goes right back into like because everything like slows down, almost comes to a stop, and then just rips right back into the thrash side of things again.
Oh hell yeah! I mean, that was just absolutely just one of those. It's like yes, and that was black metal as a whole. It wasn't like overly satanic. It was literally just a statement of intent of like we are here to fucking rock hard, and you're coming with us whether you like it or not.
Well, there's definitely message lyrics in that song, involving Satan, but it's just.
Oh yeah, I mean,
and I wonder what people would think if they say like they fell out of the metal scene, age caught up to them, they got out of it for whatever reason, and didn't really listen to it for a number of years, and then find out that this album, I don't want to say single-handedly, but definitely almost single-handedly helped create a whole genre.
Yeah,
and it took what this album did and amplified it by 1,000.
Yep. And like everyone's like, oh well, they're not really black metal. It's like these guys defined what black metal was in 1982 with this record right here.
Yeah.
So
is it modern black metal? No. But
that's fine.
Still black metal.
And that's one thing I think about Sabbath that's interesting is like you can still identify Sabbath as heavy metal.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like it was never anything but. And even 50 years later, that sound still exists. Like I saw a band last year open for Primus called The Sword.
Yeah, I've heard of The Sword.
Oh, and they're great. They're like a little thrashier Sabbath.
When I heard their first album, I described them to a buddy of mine as Viking Black Sabbath.
Yeah, pretty much. And I'd never heard them before, and they were fantastic live. And that show was great because Primus played like half a set of their stuff, and then did A Farewell to Kings by Rush.
Wow.
And dude, I did not know this at the time. Apparently, Les Claypool can sing just like Geddy Lee. He doesn't, but he can.
Did you also know Les Claypool was actually in a thrash metal band?
Yeah, he was.
He was in Possessed.
Was he?
He was in Possessed. No, not Les Claypool. The guitarist, Larry Lalonde.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, Les doesn't seem like the thrash metal type. And Jaffo, oh, trust me, we're gonna get to Gorgoroth eventually.
Yeah, well, maybe the first couple albums, anyways, before they started to turn to shit.
Yeah, their later stuff isn't.
The first three albums, they're one of the bands you might hear me use a term I use a lot. I'd be like, oh, first two albums, first three albums, and that's it. Like Dimmu Borgir, first two albums. After that, they can go fuck themselves.
Yeah, Dimmu Borgir had like some interesting aspects. I've never really gotten into them on that.
First two albums are the best because they have their own sound.
Yeah, and then you have some of the bands that's kind of stuck to the more traditional black metal sound, like Dark Funeral and stuff like that. Where they're really good.
The first two Dimmu albums aren't traditional black metal. They're slower, more melodic in some ways, a lot of keyboards. But it was their own sound. And their third album come out, it's like, oh, so you just started doing stereotype black metal.
Yeah, which I was talking with Amber about this last week with keyboards and metal, and I've heard people utter the utterly retarded phrase of like, oh well, keyboards aren't a metal instrument. Like, are you dumb?
I listened to a band with a fucking accordion.
Yeah, it's just like first of all, Hailstorm will do some pretty interesting shit with not only accordions but keyboards and stuff. Yeah,
because when I think Pirates, I think of a guy playing a keytar.
Yeah, and not to mention, like Sabaton, they use a Hammond organ for a lot of their shit.
Yeah.
And their singer Joaquin first started as their keyboard player, and he still plays all the keyboards on their record.
Yeah.
And they just never got around to finding a singer, and they were just finally like, "Oh, here, do some vocals for the demo because we can't find a singer, and then we'll find a singer along the way."
Even
and
the
then
bands
and then they just never did.
And even the bands that would shit on other bands using keyboards, like, dude, you did a whole synth fucking intro. What are you fucking talking about?
Yeah, right. I mean, Iron Maiden, freaking Judas Priest, they all did it.
Yeah. Some bands just tended to use it heavier.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. Rainbow is heavy, use keyboards a fair bit, and I like it a lot. Especially the power metal side of the house. That entire genre basically requires a keyboard.
Pretty much, yeah.
I mean, there's some bands that don't a little bit, but like Blind Guardian uses it less, but they're also a thrashier sound.
Then you also have other bands that heavily use keyboards, like Summoning.
Yep.
You hear their keyboards and their drum machine over their guitars in pretty much every track outside of anything that was on the first album, which is not good.
Yeah.
The first album, I mean, it's decent, but the drummer is so fucking bad it ruins it.
Yeah, I think the same of like some bands. Like it takes them like a couple albums to really solidify their sound and how they want to mix everything and stuff like that.
Hey, I caught a block from freaking OneRing.net for posting a Summoning link going, these guys are more J.R.R. Tolkien than you'll ever be.
Dude, I need to go. I need to go on there and start throwing up some Numenor songs and then do similar things.
Oh yeah, I mean, anyways,
because Numenor is literally Tolkien black metal.
Yeah, so Summoning, so's there's a couple other. Caladan Brood is similar, but they're not Tolkien.
Just fantasy in general, but yeah.
Yeah, well, no, it's a specific book series.
Yeah, but fantasy in general is just all downhill from Tolkien.
Oh, yeah.
I don't care what you're talking about. Even like Shad Brooks's Shadow of the Conqueror, there's elements of Lord of the Rings in there. There pretty much has to be.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, certainly freaking Song of Ice and Fire is.
Yeah, I mean, well, one of the things too, and I've said this to other people, you might have actually heard me say this at some point. The one thing I've always enjoyed, especially about the beginning of the second wave of black metal, was it was still metal, it was still extreme, but the diversity of what they were doing.
Yeah, it wasn't all the same. It hadn't developed the pattern yet.
Because you had bands like Vedblend's End, which was fusion jazz meets black metal.
Yeah, which is really interesting musically. But it's not my favorite thing. But I love people just doing interesting things with the music too. Like, even if it's not my style, I'm glad that somebody's trying to do something different.
Right.
Like, it's not just cookie cutter band after cookie cutter band. I mean, and don't get me wrong, some of those cookie cutter bands I'll listen to as well because some of it's pretty good. But
right, but in the case with me, like some of those cookie cutter bands, they may sound cookie cutter now, but they weren't when they came out.
Yeah, and
like example, Marduk. Most people hear Marduk like, oh, that's just stereotype black metal. No, they're one of the godfathers of black metal.
Yeah, pretty much. And Jaffo's absolutely right. The Iron Swan is a freaking disgusting track from the Sword. I just put that up there right among their best. But yeah, man, that's one thing. Like, I think everything kind of leans towards that over time because everything's kind of cross-pollinating and all kinds of ending up blending together into a kind of a unified sound. But yeah, it's hard, and it takes a lot of creativity to really stay away from that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, some bands will turn around and just fall into that without even trying.
Metallica,
Slayer
kind of did, yeah, towards the end.
As much as I love Dark Throne did.
Oh,
their newer output is just like, what the how drunk are you fucking guys?
Yeah, it's like for a while there, Dark Throne, they kind of went punk, and it wasn't even good punk.
No. Now they're trying to do like, trad metal in their own way,
which I appreciate, but it's not good.
Yeah. Nothing's they're not gonna do any better than what was their last black metal release? Hate Them.
I think so, yeah, and that wasn't overly great.
That had a couple good tracks on it, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, but like the album as a whole was just kind of like, it's there. You guys tried.
Yeah, did they though? Did they? 'Cause sometimes I wonder, because this is something else Razor brought up. It's like with them, they seem to want to distance themselves so far from the scene, and I can understand why in some cases, but to turn around and do the stuff they're doing, it's like, oh god, this is just terrible.
Yeah. I mean, like you say, I get the impetus to go that way and like try to distance yourself from the scene, but you kind of have to keep that lifeline back to where you started, or you're just lost.
Yeah, and I was wrong. Hate Them wasn't their last black metal release. It was Sardonic Wrath.
I don't think I've actually heard Sardonic Wrath.
It's got a couple decent tracks on it, like Sacrificing to the God of Doubt. Definitely sounds like old school, like,
and you know,
old school Dark Throne sound.
There's something to be said for it too. A lot of black metal comes from a place of like, there's a reason a lot of these bands were that young. It comes from that like teenage angst, that freaking anger, the anger and anxiety that they had, and I think they lost that over time.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was one of the things that's how I got into Black Braid, is I got into them through Razor Fest. He posted something on Twitter. He's like, if you know anybody who grew up on a res, you knew this was inevitable.
Yeah, pretty much.
And
I can completely understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Especially because I've never been on a res, but like I've seen pictures from around some of them, and it's just the most desolate, bleak place you can imagine. It's just freaking, no, it's just, I've been around military bases a long time, and none of them were that bad. I've seen some pretty bad ones.
Yeah. I mean, for example, though, like off Sardonic Wrath, the only two tracks that I really dug were Sacrificing to the God of Doubt and Jacquemat Jesu Christ, which translates to Checkmate Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And
which is still tongue in cheek, but it's.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not as tongue in cheek as, say, Skeleton Witch is.
Yeah. And I do like the tongue in cheekness of it, like especially bands like Ghost, where, you know, like I said in the review last week, it was just like, it's like they're either a satanic cult disguised as a rock band, or a rock band disguised as a satanic cult. No one's entirely sure which.
Right.
And I love how, like, I love triggering the black metal purists when it's like, oh yeah, Ghost is the most popular black metal band ever.
I don't like Ghost that much, but that's, you know, it's a me thing.
Yeah, I mean, I get where they're. I'm much more of a classical metal guy.
Yeah. Whereas I'm more of the underground extreme side.
But no, like that's why I love doing episodes like this. Is we get guys from different sides of the house all talking about bands that hold us all together and that we all enjoy.
Oh yeah, I mean, even amongst the general metal scene, like in my local area, most of the guys in the metal in my area think I'm some sort of fucking lunatic. Because it's like, I listen to a lot of the old school stuff. You know, I listen to black metal, I listen to death metal. Like the folk stuff just continually throws them for a loop. Because it's like, it'll go from like, this sounds like something that belongs in like Game of Thrones to like pure unadulterated Marduk style black metal.
Yeah.
Within like the same track or
the same album, certainly.
Oh yeah. Like I've mentioned it before. The first Borknagar album went back and forth from like black metal to like acoustic synth instrumentals, like track to track to track to track. And that was also another super group. It had Garm from Ulver singing, Grim from Immortal before he passed away on drums.
Yep.
The guitarist, is it Ivar or Grudel from Enslaved? I forget which.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of that, and now, it may not create a more coherent album, but it's at least musically interesting. Like you're not making the same 12 tracks over and over again.
Right. And the other thing about this era of metal, be it Venom, black metal, the Bathory stuff, so many different bands from this era created genres. Yeah, without middle era Bathory, we probably wouldn't have the Viking metal stuff.
No, I mean, like they started out as black metal, like pretty much purely, and then Orthon kind of went into like the Scandinavian roots a little bit and fucked around and created created Viking metal.
And then from that, you had bands like Amon Amarth, Enslaved, you know, Tyrfing,
yep,
so on and so on and so forth. It's amazing how just these quote unquote underground metal albums from the early to mid 80s came along and just redefined shit.
Yeah, it's really interesting too how different bands will come at the same kind of subject material from very different ways. And like you'll have Viking metal bands like Amon Amarth or something like that that are more on the thrash or death metal side of the house. And then you have, bands like Tyr
Yeah,
or
which is
Leaves Eyes
more
that come at it from a symphonic or power metal side of the house.
right.
Which I like both of them.
Monomarth puts on one hell of a fucking stage show.
Yes, they do. I've seen them live. They were opening for Slayer on one of the legs of their 4-year long farewell tour, and they were fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think they could. I thought they would overplay Slayer, and yeah, that didn't happen.
Yeah, no,
because Slayer came out and absolutely slaughtered it.
But yeah, no, Monomarth is very, very good. If you dig to the people in the audience, if you dig the show The Vikings, this would be a modern soundtrack for that show.
Yep, pretty much.
They actually did a song called Blood Eagle, which I thought would have been perfect for the blood eagling scene.
Yes, that would have been pretty much perfect in the background of there. And I saw these guys live on their first American tour. Leaves Eyes is actually fantastic if you're into the more like folk side of the house.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of do like a very traditional Norse music in the background, and their female lead is actually an opera singer.
Huh.
And then they have the typical male lead, but they're an interesting band, and they do all their songs about like Norwegian history.
Well, that's like also too. You had you familiar with the band Storm from Norway?
Yes.
It's Fenris from Darkthrone, Satyr from Satyricon, and the female singer from Third and the Mortal. And it's just pure folk music. It's the goofiest shit you'll ever hear. Especially when you because Fenris can't sing. If you ever heard Fenris try to sing,
it's clean. It's not good.
It's something to behold.
It's just like, I don't know how you got a job as a singer when you sound like that.
And you're trying to sound like that.
Yeah, it's just like now we understand why you were a black metal singer. You don't have a normal.
Well, no, he normally isn't the singer. Because
that's right. Yeah,
it's Nocturnal Cultus.
Yeah, that's right. I got those two confused somehow. But no, I mean that's it's like when Yngwie tried to sing on his later albums. It's like, buddy, no,
stick to the guitar.
It's just like, I love you, but no. It's like a real fan will tell you when you're fucking up, and you're fucking up right now. But no, I mean that entire era of like the mid to late 80s, like there was just genres spinning off constantly of new bands, new styles. I mean, like right about this time, like 1980 to 81, you had pretty much heavy metal, and that was it. And then speed metal pumped off with bands like Saxon and Motorhead that kind of drove that sound. And then you had these guys creating the more extreme metal genres, and power metal spun off somewhere in the middle there from Rainbow and Queen. And you had the beginnings of industrial metal in this era. And it was just incredible amounts of creativity coming out. I don't know whether the drugs were really good in this era, or there was just new ideas floating around the community and really making an impact, or what. But it was really, really good, and just a really incredible era. And that's why I chose to do 2 albums. I normally only do 1. These 2 really cemented the foundations of all of thrash, death, and black metal, from Metallica to Slayer to Death to Bathory and on into Darkthrone and Mayhem. Like they all basically came from here. And I love covering these moments in time as well, because it's just a watershed event. It's like when Sabbath released their first record, and it just created a sonic shift in everything around them. Like you had Sabbath come out with their records, and then you can immediately hear bands like Zeppelin and Deep Purple and stuff like that get progressively heavier right alongside them.
Yeah. It's when it comes to certain bands and sounds, I think it comes down to timing. Like something new was needed. Like at the time, the second wave of black metal started getting big, like 95, 96, when it started getting big outside of their own scenes. Death metal was getting stale.
Yep.
It honestly and truly was.
And thrash metal had all but disappeared.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't get me wrong, I like some death metal bands, but if I wanted to hear lyrics that are reminiscent of a horror movie, I'll go watch a horror movie.
Hey, Nick Weiser's here. How's it going, my friend? So, sorry you couldn't make the panel, but man, this has been a great conversation, and I can't wait to have one with you boys again about some more records. That Bonded Metal stream we did was great.
Yeah.
Because we got to hit on all sorts of topics, from death metal to thrash to power metal, all the way around the house.
Like I said to both of you guys, I'm looking forward to when we get around to doing a black metal retrospective.
Oh, that would be fucking great. I'll have to do a lot of research for it, because I mean, I'm one of those guys, like, I'm into black metal, but like I don't listen to it all the time. So I'd have to do some real brushing up. But like that's what I do for all of these episodes. I'll go and listen to the albums in question for.
I did that for these two because I hadn't listened to them in a while.
We was doing Molestar Black Sabbath panel. Oh my god, EFAP Black Sabbath. Oh my god, it would be amazing.
Yeah.
We'd have to get so many people in on this, like you, me, Nick, 70s rock fan. If you're listening, yes, we're doing it.
Might even have to poke comics on that one.
Absolutely, man. If you, we'll get everybody in here on that one, because that would be just fucking insane. I mean, because you're talking about a band with a 50-year career.
Yeah.
And
there's a reason why the metal mythos is what, like almost 2 hours, almost 3 hours or something.
Yeah, and like he really went in all in on every era of it. And there's a lot of fans who like only like one of their eras. I like it all for different reasons. Like I think Dio era Sabbath has some clear advantages over Ozzy's era.
Mob Rules is a great album and track.
Oh, Mob Rules is a fantastic record. Both of Dio's records with him are all-time classics.
I can remember a buddy of mine who was into Black Sabbath back in the day. We were like junior high, high school. He bought Mob Rules. He was like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah, man.
It was so different from what he was used to hearing. As far
well,
as
I mean, I think I said this to 70s on one of our reviews. Like, when you had Heaven and Hell come out in 1980. No one had heard Dio era Sabbath before. That was his first record. And like, you're used to hearing like kind of the more down-paced, Ozzy era stuff. And then the first track on the record is Neon Nights. Just like, holy shit, what is this?
Definitely sonically changed.
Sabbath. Yeah, and for the better, I think.
Yeah, because they took some of the ideas from that era and kept progressing them along.
Yeah, and I mean, and Ozzy era Sabbath stands on its own as like, the foundation of heavy metal and the whole era of that band that was great. And I think if you listen to some of their later 70s stuff, like Never Say Die or something like that, I think they needed a change.
Yes. Well, that's like what I was saying with like the death metal scene in the mid 90s. It was like, all right, this is getting kind of tired. You got bands that weren't death metal trying to be death metal, like Testament.
Yep.
That was not their best two albums.
Yeah.
Demonic and Low.
Yep. And also Creator to an extent too.
And it was just, and some of the stuff that was coming out was like, yeah, okay, they were trying to experiment, but it wasn't.
You could tell their heart wasn't really in that camp, so it didn't sound as good.
And you also had bands that were death metal stop being death metal, like Amorphous.
Yep.
Like that during the mid 90s, they started putting out more prog metal albums, where they would use the growling style vocals either not at all or very, very sparingly.
And Jaffo just put it perfectly. It's I am a Tony Iommi fan, man. Like, he is just perfect. He is one of the best guitarists of all time. Like, maybe not from a technical standpoint, but in terms of the impact he's had of just, face it, everybody who plays guitar now has listened to Tony Iommi.
At some point, whether they knew it or not. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like they have listened to Tony Iommi, and it's probably influenced them in some way. And God knows Black Sabbath influenced these guys. I mean, the lyrical content, like there would be no Venom or anything darker without Sabbath coming along first and kind of paving the way for it. Because like I think a lot of metal fans, at least, were looking for that kind of content and weren't getting it in the late 70s. Whereas I think if these guys dropped out of the clear blue sky, it would have been like, what?
Yeah, because it's I mean, I was alive in the late 70s. Not that I remember shit. I lived 4 years in the 70s. It was, you know, if you look at the music at the time, everything was, you know, I guess there was an underground. There's always an underground for, styles of music, but even the rock at the time, you had disco, which then spawned punk as a response.
Yeah.
It was all this, pop music was king.
Yeah.
And I think people, this is true to this day and age, just want something more. They don't want that plastic prefabbed music. They want something that you can tell that may not have the best production or whatever,
but it has a soul behind it.
Yeah, you can hear the passion, you can hear the soul. And so I remember saying it years ago to someone that metal to me, it doesn't matter if it's death metal, if it's black metal, thrash, power, doom, whatever. But if you can tell that the guys making the music love what they're doing, then it's fucking metal.
Yeah, I think that one ingredient, more than anything else, will propel an album from being mediocre to being truly a good record. And
yes,
I think that the heart you put into it and the passion you do it with, I think, is what's there for bands like Priest and Saxon now, because their latest records have been absolutely killer, and Accept too.
Right.
Accept's newest record is phenomenal.
Right.
And I think that's one of the reasons Iron Maiden is failing, just because I think they've lost the passion for it.
Yeah. Well, when you have as much money as they do, and then you've been doing what you've been doing for as long as they have, it's like, okay. And you see this in everything: music, video games, movies. Like, there's a fan base. Like, we have our fan base. They're not going anywhere. We can just do whatever we want, and it'll be okay.
Yeah, and it inevitably causes the downfall of whatever that was. I mean, look at Battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Battlefield had a built-in fan base for so long, and like for the last 2 releases, really,
yeah,
it's been like me with Star Trek, where you're just coming back to it like a battered spouse. Like, they won't do it to me again. They promised this time.
Yeah.
And then we got Battlefield 2042, and I think most of the fans are finally just like, you know what? Fuck off.
I saw something a couple of months ago. Battlefield 1 and 5 each one had more users than 2042 did on Steam.
Which Battlefield 5 also had a tiny amount of the user base that even Battlefield 4 still does.
Yeah.
So, because that's what people wanted. And that game was fun and stayed fun for a long time. Like, even Battlefield 1, I got bored with fairly quickly. Like, I love the World War I era. It's like probably my favorite historical period to play around in. But everyone's running around with an MP18 or some sort of automatic that there was maybe a couple thousand of them that got to the front before the end of the war. And that's why games like Beyond the Wire or Verdun a lot better is that you get a bolt action rifle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Jaffo's right here. It's a creative issue.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a pressure from your record label as well to be like, hey, it's like, put something out. It's like, it's been 3 years, you guys are touring, but put something out. And a lot of bands will get dropped at that point because they don't really have anything ready, and they don't have an idea for an album, and they just have to crank one out, and it's not going to be anywhere near what a band does or any kind of artist when they're actually inspired to do something and really have their mind behind it, and all of the and all of their energy is really put behind a project. I think you can tell, especially live. There have been so many bands that I've liked their album and then went to see them live and they're trash. And it's one of the most disappointing things I can think of, where it's just like, oh man, like, you did so well on your record and then you come out here and it's just bad. And I don't know if it's the production on some of those shows. I don't know if a lot of them are drunk during the show, because that's a thing in rock and metal that happens a lot. I know right before he got kicked out of the band, freaking getting Ozzy Osbourne into the studio and sober was a near impossibility, and that's why he eventually got fired. And even his solo stuff, I've read a couple of tour diaries of his, and it's just, I'm amazed he's still alive. because he was doing a bump of cocaine or an 8 ball of cocaine to wake up in the morning and have enough energy to do the show. And then he would be all wired after the show. So he'd come down with heroin, and just that constant roller coaster for years. And I'm amazed that he lived through it, because most people probably wouldn't have. I mean, Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue damn near died doing it 4 times. And just happened to luck out. Somebody was able to bring him back. But no, I mean, I think that is the heart of metal in general, is the passion and the energy and the soul of the music that gives it that extra boost to get above and beyond the rock and roll, like the radio rock era. And I think that's what has kept it going this long, because like I said, in the mid 90s, like the old school metal bands were all but gone. And then you had Metallica and thrash were still around to some degree. Like, Megadeth and Slayer and Anthrax were all still around, but they were all producing different type of stuff. I mean, Metallica had sold out and gone with the more mainstream hard rock sound, and Megadeth were producing an album every now and again, and it was still good, but nobody was listening to them, unfortunately. Yeah, and I think you're right here, man. Like, like if your focus isn't in it and on a specific idea, you just come up with a bunch of random stuff, and it all kinds of just ends up, like you say, a garden with a bunch of crap growing in it, rather than an actual curated garden. And I think that's an important part of what makes any kind of art hard, is you run out of ideas eventually. And there's no shame in like saying, hey, we're out of ideas. This thing has kind of run its course. It's been a great career, but we got to go. And I think bands hang in there for way too long sometimes and end up kind of sullying their legacy with a bunch of generic crap that really doesn't measure up to their later output. Iron Maiden is certainly responsible on that part. I mean, they've done nothing that was really all that interesting since Brave New World in 2000. We're now 22 years into later, and their newest record did not impress me at all. Like, it was just ponderous and overlong, and every track had like a 2-minute acoustic intro, which I don't mind on like 1 or 2 songs, but when the entire record does that, it's just I just couldn't get into it. Like, especially given how they started, where they were very upbeat, very very fast paced, very energetic, and now it's just kind of lies there. And I don't think that's a positive thing for the band. And to an extent, the fans are responsible as well, because we keep buying the records, we keep going to the shows, and as long as that keeps happening, I think we're going to see a lot of the same thing from bands like them. And it's the same in movies and stuff. If you notice, when they really started to change was when we stopped showing up, and bands and movies started losing money. These big expensive productions didn't stop bringing in the billions of dollars they had before. Like Star Wars is a perfect example. Last Jedi made half of what Force Awakens did, and then Solo lost money, at least on the initial release. So I think it's a lot of the fans need to stop putting up with subpar content. And it's generally like I said, sometimes you just have to call it a career too. I mean, there is no shame in doing that. Slayer did it. Although Carrie's now come out and said, he thinks they have a little more in them. But you've already called it quits, so it's kind of hard to come back from retirement at that point and do another album. But no, I mean, it's a tough thing. Like you have to know when to walk away.
And then you have some bands who just keep pumping out fairly decent material.
That's what I was just talking about with Iron Maiden. Like the last few albums have just been completely uninspired.
Oh, it's the same thing with Cannibal Corpse too.
Yeah, I haven't listened to a lot of their stuff, but like I can imagine they're getting to the point in their career where it's just like, well, what can we do that we haven't done already?
They've been around for like 30 years.
Yeah, and like you run out of, especially in the more extreme genres, you run out of stuff you haven't done yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where a band like Priest can keep going because there's always more stuff they can do, and that sound is so iconic that they can just kind of power through it. Yeah, just keep making great content. But I think a band like Cannibal Corpse is like there's only so much of it you can do, especially the toll that takes on someone's voice.
Yeah, and I've met George a couple times. He's a hell of a guy.
Yeah, I've heard he's a freaking amazing dude.
He is. He's a really good dude. So is the bassist, Alex Webster.
And like you're sad to see him go, but at a certain point, it's just like, dude, you're not helping your career any at this point.
Well,
you're just kind of going along on inertia.
Yeah, at the same time, though, you got to wonder how much money they've made over their career. For example, Abbott, of Immortal fame, for a long time was a postman.
Yep.
While still in Immortal and whatever other band he was doing at the time.
Well, I mean, I've said it for years. You don't play heavy metal to make money.
Yeah.
You do it because you love it.
And could you imagine Abbott as your fucking postman, though?
Yeah, right. Like imagine like you're from the area. Like,
yeah,
didn't I just see you on stage last night?
Long hair, beard, kind of scary looking even without the makeup, and it's like, huh?
What's this guy do?
Yeah. But it's good to see certain bands still, even if they only do it once in a blue moon, put out, they could put out a bunch of albums, but every once in a while they'll have one that just catches that old spark they used to have.
Yep, and that can be a whole revival for the band too. Like, I think Priest especially benefited from having Richie Faulkner rotate into the band and bringing a whole new style and a whole new life into it. Because I really get mad at a lot of Priest fans who call him KK's replacement because you can't replace KK Downing.
Right.
But you can bring in a new guitarist and have a new sound come out of it. And now, like, I get that, there's only one guy in the band who's actually an original member at this point. But it's not like there are a bunch of session musicians that just get hired on. I mean, Scott's been in the band since 1990. Rob's been in there since 74.
Right.
Glenn is still on the writing team, at least, even if he can't play anymore, especially live. He's still involved in the writing process and all that. Ian's still doing Ian things over there. And then you have Richie coming in, who's easily 20 years younger than all of them and has a different perspective on it. And I think that's what made Redeemer of Souls and Firepower so good as records. Is you had that new sound come in, and he's a brilliant guitar player too. And I think that was important to kind of get a new energy into the band. Because, I mean, we have all of this stuff going on, and it's easy to get lost in the sea of other bands that are out there, even as an established name like Judas Priest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what black and death metal are going through right now, where a lot of the old hands are kind of either losing steam or they've already lost it and are still going along on inertia, essentially, just trying to keep going and keep making some money until they find it again.
Yeah, and unfortunately, some will never catch that again.
Yeah, I mean, Dark Throne, looking at you here.
Dark Throne, Immortal, but they kind of packed it in.
Yeah, I mean, Dark Throne's still putting out material every now and again, and they're one of those bands that's like, please stop.
Yeah,
it's like all you're doing is just shooting your previous legacy in the foot.
And there's some bands I'd like to see at least do one more decent album, like Emperor.
Yeah, I would love to see them come out with a new one.
I mean, they still do the festival circuit, but
yeah, they haven't released anything in years.
Yeah.
I don't even know when their last album was. Probably 2010?
Might even have been earlier than that. I'm checking now.
But yeah, man, like there's bands like that like as long as you're touring and as long as you're still around, like the fans won't go anywhere, but like you have to worry about taking a pause like that and wonder if your fan base is still going to be there when you get back, because there's always a new band coming out. There's always new music coming out that people will listen to just to fill the gap, if nothing else. And you're going to run into that wall at some point where you get like 10 years and then you come back and try to do a new record and all of a sudden nobody cares.
So, yeah, Emperor's final album.
Yeah.
Prometheus, The Discipline of Fire and Demise, 2001.
Jesus Christ, it's been that long?
Mm-hmm.
I knew that it'd been a while. I didn't realize it had been 20 years.
Yeah, and all they pretty much do nowadays is they'll play the occasional live show and the festival circuit.
So they're kind of like Manowar, where they're like they'll tour all the time, but they won't.
They don't even tour all the time. It's just they'll hit a couple festivals, probably ones that are in Norway, like Hole in the Sky or something like that.
Yeah, and or maybe Vakken.
Yeah, do like 1 or 2 big gigs in the summer, and that's it, because they're all in other bands.
Yeah, true.
Isan's got his own lineup of bands that he's doing.
Yeah, that's true. When you're in multiple different bands, it's hard to get together and record an album with any single one of them.
Right.
I'm actually kind of impressed that Corey Taylor manages to do it with Stone Sour and Slipknot.
I mean, you always kind of saw that even in the black metal scene, like so-and-so would be in this band and then that band. And usually, yes, one of the two bands would take priority.
Yeah.
But then there's been times when it's just been split fairly 50-50.
Yeah, they're just kind of bouncing around between bands and doing what they do.
Because isn't one of the guys from Sargeist also one of the main guys in like Satanic Warmaster?
I think you're right, yeah.
Or Horna or something like that. It's like those three bands are all like related.
Yeah, they're all kind of interwoven. I can't remember if one guy's in both of the other bands, or like there's members, if they're all scattered throughout. But
and you saw that a lot, especially in the second wave of black metal. You'd see like, you had Emperor, and then there was Zyklon and Dodheim's Guard and Vedbuen's End, and they even, because of Samoth's label, they brought in bands like Limbonic Art and Odium. So it kind of, what you saw a lot of was just cross-pollination.
Yeah. And I think that contributed to the sound kind of unifying and kind of blending in and all becoming kind of samey over the years, is that these guys are all in bands with each other and are all kind of, like you say, cross-pollinating, and it kind of creates this very unified sound across the whole genre.
Yeah, and there's something to that drives me absolutely insane, is when you have a band that has their own distinct sound. And I'll use 2 examples here. Abigor, their early stuff had that distinct sound with the synth and everything. And Limbonic Art was the same way. It was a 2-man project, so drum machine, heavy synth. After doing that for a few albums, like they both cut out the synth.
Yeah.
It became pure black metal. It's like, why?
It's like, you guys actually had something unique going that people were actually latching onto. Why are you changing now?
And I mean, the sound is still unique, but at the same time, kind of the song structures are very stereotypical. It's, it's missing something, in my opinion. I know there's some people out there that prefer Abigor without like the later period of Abigor. We keep bringing them up, but Razor tends to be one of those.
Okay. I mean, like, I mean, he's a big black metal fan. That's why, and he's one of the biggest music channels that covers this kind of music on YouTube. So he's kind of the,
and it's not even like Abigor overdid it on the synth.
No, they just kind of had it in there.
Yeah, and it was done very tastefully when they did use Limbonic Art. On the other hand, was heavy synth. Almost not to the same degree as, say, Summoning, but pretty close.
Yeah, where it's almost more symphonic metal than it is black metal.
No, it's symphonic black metal.
Yeah.
But here's something for you. So we had bands like Venom and Bathory and Slayer and all these bands in the early days of the 80s metal scenes where you still had solos.
Yep. I mean, I say a lot of shit about Kerry King's solos. I'm not a fan of his lead work, because
I'm not talking about the quality of solos, mind you,
but they existed.
Right. Then
And
you
a
have
lot of the second wave stuff, they just went away.
Yeah, no solos. Even in death metal, like the earlier days of death metal, you'd have solos.
That's one of, I think, the biggest travesties of 90s music in general, and metal in particular, is they all forgot what a guitar solo was.
Because even the days of like the old Swedish death metal scene, where it had that real fuzzy, crunchy sound, I love those solos because of that production style and the tuning and everything that they used. The solos sounded unique.
Yeah, it sounded very different, but it still sounded
like a guitar solo.
Yeah, and it was still a guitar solo. And Venom too. Like yeah, it's not as clean and produced as like something Van Halen or Priest might come out with, but the solos were still pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And Bathory had more than had them in most of their songs, and that kind of slowly devolved and went away over the time. And I'm kind of mad about that because the guitar solo used to be a freaking key thing in any metal song.
As someone who grew up as a metalhead in the 90s, God help me.
we were truly deprived little children.
I wasn't a child then.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you were older. I didn't know any better yet.
A lot of people at the time felt like stuff like guitar solos in metal was like a cheesy 80s thing.
Yeah, and like it seems like they were trying to get as far away from the 80s as possible, and I don't know why, because that was the heyday of heavy metal.
Yeah, but to normies, and Jaffo might be able to back me up on this, normies, when they thought metal going into the 90s, they were thinking the hair bands.
Yeah, because that was the popular stuff, and that was what that was getting radio play at the time.
The only band that wasn't a hair band that was catching radio play was Metallica.
Yeah, and the funny part was they sold out at the height of their popularity. It's just like, dude, what are you doing? You're the biggest band on earth in 1990 playing thrash metal.
Yeah.
And you're going to sell out, and why not sell out? The Black Album was an interesting experiment, but everyone kind of expected them to come back to
form.
Yeah, come back to form on that, and then it didn't happen. So I think a lot, like coming into like Load and Reload, everyone's just like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, why are you doing this? I personally fucking hated it.
Like I dig the Black Album. That's also the first album I heard from them. So that kind of informed my opinion on it. But I did like the Black Album for what it was, but it was a very big departure from Metallica. And that was, and like I said, they were the biggest band on earth. Like they were selling out arenas the world over. What the hell are you doing trying to build a bigger audience? People don't, like people who don't listen to rock or metal have heard you.
Yeah.
Like everyone who's going to listen to your shit already listens to it.
You're the only metal band that MTV debuted 2 of your music videos like on prime time, not Headbangers Ball. Yeah,
pretty much. Like that was like, for those of you too young to remember, like even I'm pretty young for it, but I remember catching an episode or two here or there. Was like, if you had a new album or something like that come out and you wanted MTV to promote it, it would be on Headbangers Ball, and that was it. And if you really got popular, they would play on TRL every now and again.
There was also a couple. They had a couple other shows that were more metal oriented at different times. Like they had one started off as the Hard 60. It was 60.
I remember that one.
Yeah, and then they cut it down to like the Hard 30 or something like that.
It's like we still like you guys, metalheads, but not that much.
Yeah, well, that was also the time when they cut it down. Was at the time because they wanted to.
Yeah, I think
they wanted
right here.
Yeah, he is. They wanted to cater more towards the upcoming grunge shit.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that had to do, again, like you were saying in the Bonded by Metal stream, of a lot of these hair bands were up for big contracts because they were really popular. They were selling records. And if they stuck with their labels, those labels were going to have to pay them.
Yep.
So I think the labels got with the radio stations and kind of went with that Seattle grunge sound that these guys were all brand new. Nobody knew who they were. And like the grunge and pop punk sound both came around in like the late 80s, early 90s. And they really the labels latched onto that because they're like, hey, we can pay these guys nothing.
Yeah. That was definitely part of it. And I think too, people were just getting bored of the hair
band after hair band. Yeah.
It's all looked the same. It all sound the same. All the songs are about partying and chicks and drugs and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, and that's good for a couple albums, but then it kind of gets old.
Right.
And you saw that with a lot of the hair bands. Like you'd have like one or two really solid albums, and then they'd fall off.
Yeah.
I think one of the only ones that wasn't really like that is Dokken.
Dokken was one.
And the Dokken, it's really just because of George Lynch's guitar work.
And believe it or not, Motley Crue falls into that category.
Yeah, their first like 4 or 5 albums were really good.
They didn't really fall off until after Dr. Feelgood.
Yeah, and that was a hell of a record.
Mm-hmm.
And also given the substance abuse history in that band, it was about time for them to self-destruct anyway.
Yeah, the fact that they hadn't at that point, and that was like the problem with a lot of 80s bands that had gotten big, substance abuse issues and partying and drama and et cetera, waylaid so many bands.
Yeah, and like they just could never get their shit together long enough to actually put a career together.
I mean, that's why there was for a long time in the underground, there was a whole like almost like a stigma. Like if a band was known to be like heavy partiers, they were kind of looked at as what's your idea of heavy partying? Drinking and weed? Okay, you just drink a lot, smoke a lot. That's fine. They were more concerned about like you get into like hardcore drugs because
Well, like I was saying to the chat, I mean, you had Ozzy who was doing an 8-ball of cocaine to wake up in the morning for a show.
Yeah,
and then was so wired by the time he came off stage, you need to shoot up with heroin to fucking come down and go to sleep.
Yeah,
and he did that for years. And I'm amazed he survived it, let alone actually have his brain intact.
As far as what Jaffo's saying in the chat there, that was only for tangential fans and even normie fans, like people like me who still are, dyed in the wool. I bleed fucking metal. We just started finding what else was there. Like I said, I got lucky with a record store in my area, and even a college radio station in my area for Vassar College that had a weekly metal show, and I got to hear a bunch of bands. And thanks to this shop being in existence, I was able to go and buy the albums.
Yeah.
So and a couple friends of mine at the time, I was able to turn around and dig into like underground thrash bands like Atrophy and Demolition Hammer. And if you've never heard Demolition Hammer, fucking check them out.
They're heavily recommended if you're a thrash fan. They're fucking phenomenal.
They're amazingly good. Same with Atrophy. And then you also started finding like other underground acts that came out. Like it was like this thrash funk band with a DJ from San Francisco called Mordred.
I've heard of them. I don't know that I've ever actually heard any of their stuff though.
Some of their stuff is pretty good. Like their first album is definitely way more thrashy. You can tell the bass player has got like a funk or jazz background because that's very evident in it. They didn't quite have like the DJ yet. Like they literally had a DJ scratching on some of their songs.
And then you had the bands that kind of tried to experiment with new music in the 90s, like Anthrax when they did that collaboration with freaking Public Enemy.
That was actually really popular even amongst metal fans.
Yeah, it was actually a good song too, but it was just kind of like it was a departure for them.
Not so much.
And they only did one song like that. They didn't.
Right. Well, they also had On the Man.
Yeah.
Which was, at the time a metal rap.
Mm-hmm.
But
on similar era records, you also had songs like I Am the Law.
Right.
Which that kind of reassured the, diehard metalheads like us. Like, no, this isn't our new sound. We're just kind of playing around with it. Like, we're still doing thrash.
And that was the greatest thing with some bands. Like they could experiment a little bit, but all they had to do was still put out. It's like, no, see, we're still doing this shit. This is just a 1-off, 2-off kind of deal.
Yeah, it's a fun thing that we wanted to play around with and see how, and just
considering that Anthrax is also from New York, which is one of the birthplaces of hip hop.
Yeah, and Public Enemy came out of there.
Yeah, a lot of rap artists did in the 80s. So it was kind of one of those things like they were also surrounded by it.
Yeah, so it kind of influenced them in a lot of ways too. Rob Flynn from Machine Head talks about that a lot, of growing up in the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in Oakland, mostly being a black neighborhood and stuff like that, and having like rap and stuff like that really influenced their style. Or being all around them growing up, and an early Machine Head I can really recommend.
I like their first album. I saw them once. I saw them with Machine Head, Biohazard, and Slayer.
Like up until the mid 2000s, I can kind of recommend Machine Head, but after that, they got really political. Rob's always been pretty far left. He's from the Bay Area. It's not his fault. He just doesn't know any better. But I think their last album I just turned off because I'm just like, no, it's just constant. Like if you want to make shots at a president or whatever, or this political issue or that, go for it. That's what the genre's there for. I mean, hell, War Pigs was on Sabbath's second record.
Oh yeah, you had Sabbath with War Pigs. You had a bunch of bands put out political takes, but it wasn't
the entire record.
It wasn't like the entire record.
They'd say something here and there.
Outside of the 90s with Bush, you didn't see songs targeted at a specific political figure usually. Usually it was just the government as a whole or the systems as a whole. And even then it wasn't so much a left-wing take because you have bands like Havoc, which are libertarian.
Yeah, or Iced Earth is big into that as well. I mean, John Schaefer got arrested on January 6th.
Right. So
I haven't heard if he's ever been released. A lot of those guys are still in jail.
I have no idea.
I don't know how that's legal. A lot of them haven't even been charged.
Yeah, correct.
But
it's so funny how we're having all these side discussions around metal in general because of these two albums.
Yeah, pretty much. And like that's how central these two were to the metal genre as a whole. Is everybody connects to these guys,
whether they want to admit it or not.
Yeah, whether they like to be associated with them or not is another matter. I mean, I know Razor's ranted about it. I ranted about it. Corthon, you didn't create black metal on your own, man.
No, he didn't.
You're even named after a song on this record.
Yeah.
In Countess Bathory. So, like, let's not play games here, shall we? Oh, and you all chose demonic names, just like freaking Venom did.
Yeah.
Like, so let's not freaking beat around the bush here. Like, you guys saw what Venom did.
Well, so did Hellhammer and Celtic Frost did too.
Well, that's true as well.
As Sodom did, and
But they admit it.
Yeah.
And Corthon just never did.
They freaking bent the knee recently.
Did they?
Yeah, the whole pandemic thing. Like, oh well, we have to cancel shows cause.
Yeah.
And it was like they didn't say like, oh, in non-metal tradition, it wasn't like, oh, we were made to cancel. This sucks. No, they were like, oh no, well, we decided to cancel.
I mean, back in the day, like especially in the 70s and 80s, like punk is more known for this, but metal did it too. Where like if they canceled it, they'd sit up in the fucking parking lot and play anyway.
Yeah, I made a comment something along those lines. The 70s on the last Foul Ball show we were on, that punk seemed to be rebellious for reasons, be it political or societal, or just a rebellion to the music that was out at the time, be it the pop music and disco.
Yeah, they were just like, whatever that is, we're not it.
Whereas metal seemed to, at least in the early 80s, seemed to be rebellious for the sake of rebellion.
To an extent, but I think a lot of it was just like, this is what we are, this is who we are, and we just like playing fast and loud and out of control. And if you're with us on that, then come on.
Because it also comes out too that like you talk to guys in like the Swedish and Norse scenes, be it black metal or whatever, that because those countries, when you're born, you're automatically entered into the church, the state church.
Yeah.
No, your parents don't even have a say.
Yeah.
It's just automatically done. That a lot of, especially the overt satanic imagery and lyrical content, was just a big fuck you to Scandinavian society.
Yeah.
And some people have even called out like the left-wing political systems in those countries. They're like, yeah, no, fuck you.
Yeah, no, metal has always had a very strong anti-authoritarian leaning, which is why I really hate to see some of these left-wing bands come out now. It's just like, what are you doing? It's like, this is not metal. This is not who we are.
Yeah.
Like Dave Draymond is from Disturbed. Like, I like a lot of Disturbed, but I wouldn't say I'm their biggest fan. And I went to see them in 2019 when they came through Worcester, and like I really loved what Dave had to say on that one. He personally is very left wing, But he can't, like, one of the first things he said when they got on stage was, I don't give a fuck who you voted for, what your beliefs are, who you pray to, whatever. Tonight we are all brothers and sisters in metal. Let's fucking do this thing.
Yeah, as it should be.
Yeah, that is heavy metal. It's
Mhm.
like, we don't give a shit who you are. We accept you as you come.
Yeah, if you're here with us as one of us, well, that's just it. You're one of us.
Like, we had a kid when I was at Metal Fest in 2016. We had a kid come in, you know, looked like a rap guy, like, you know, basketball shirt, chains, all that kind of stuff. And we're all kind of at the bar, kind of giving him like a look like, bro, are you in the right place? But he just threw his horns up and jumped in the freaking crowd. And we were like, all right, buddy, get it.
Well, that's the thing too, is people always say, like, you know, metalheads were a bunch of barbarians. In my case, I am.
Yeah.
Or, you know, savages and so on and so forth. But you get into a mosh pit, you get knocked down, you're getting picked up by like 3 different people, like, immediately.
Yeah, like, dude, like, and that's one of my favorite things about the genre is like how awesome the crowds are to each other. For the most part. You always
For the
have
most part, you're always gonna have an asshole. Yeah. Like some dude's trying to throw spin kicks in a fucking mosh pit.
Yeah, and that dude usually gets handled real fast.
Oh yeah. Or some asshole who accidentally, like, I saw this at a show. Some dude is in there throwing elbows and clocks this poor girl.
Yeah.
Every dude just turned and looked at him, and he had this look on his face of, oh shit, I fucked up.
And we're like, yeah, you did.
Yeah, you did. And no one noticed it, but he got pummeled in the crowd. Yeah, it still looked like a mosh pit. It wasn't a mosh pit.
And if you're acting like a dick in the pit or just being an asshole to the other fans, like, trust me, the crowd will handle it before security gets there.
Yeah. And there's been times, because the one venue I would go to a lot, we became friends with the bouncers.
Yeah.
So they, you know, something like that would go down, and one of us would go tell the bouncer, like, hey, give us about 5 minutes. You're going to have to drag somebody out of here. And he'd be like, what this time? You know, like this example we told him, like, oh, some dude's throwing elbows in the pit and, like, you know, fucked up this chick. He's like, all right, I'll give you guys about 5 minutes. Yeah, and then he'd come over and
it's about time for my smoke break.
Yeah, a couple of the bouncers would come and just drag the poor bastard out. Like,
yeah, and that's how we handle business. Yeah. And that's like, I don't know if you've probably seen it at shows too. I know I've seen it at a couple where, like, the skinheads will show up.
Yeah.
And, like, there's this unspoken rule that you're allowed to come to our shows. You don't throw fucking salutes. Don't be fucking a dick, and you're fine. Just behave yourselves. And they can never do it.
Yeah.
They always say something.
They always do something stupid. You know, they get a few beers in them, and it's like, oh yeah,
and they're throwing freaking Nazi salutes in the.
Yeah, that doesn't go over well
in the pit or whatever, and they usually just get housed.
Yeah, it kind of goes along with what Dan Vasquez said about metal. There is a brotherhood / sisterhood to it.
There absolutely is.
Most metalheads that I've known either didn't have a great childhood, and when I say that, I mean they were ridiculed, mocked, picked on for whatever reason, and it's almost like metal is like the island of the misfit toys.
Yeah, we really are, and I love that about it, because you get guys from all over the place too.
Yeah,
like, you know, you have the more clean cut guys like me, or how I was in my younger days, when I was an active duty Marine.
Right,
like,
I wasn't that clean cut, but
we were all hardcore. We were all hardcore fans, and we were all into it. Like, you'd see a bunch of us, like, in the pit at a metal show, and we all had freaking high and tights, and like everyone knew who we were.
Right. You know, you probably got a couple looks at, like, these guys like skinhead. Oh no, they're just Marines. Often.
Yeah, it's like, you know, easy mistake to make in some cases, but you know, but no, I mean, and I was amazed at how many nerds are also freaking metalheads. Like, especially coming into this community and starting this, I'm like, oh, you know, I'll probably have a couple of people that are into it and whatever, and I started getting this huge response from people.
Oh yeah, because
I'm just like, everyone's just like, dude, do it. Like, do music reviews. I really like it. Like, I just threw it out there as an idea because it's something I like talking about, and the response and the participation too. Like, I've just, you know, messaged you guys, have you come on, and everyone I've talked to, like, was really into it, really wants to do it, and like, I know I'm working on an episode with Culture. If we can figure out a band to do that, nice. we both enjoy, and comics I want to get on at some point. Like, I just did an episode with Amber, Jaffo. I want to have you on at some point, and it's been a really just a great freaking experience of just like, you wouldn't anticipate like those worlds colliding in a lot of ways, but like, no, we're the D&D nerds from high school that all gathered around, played tabletop, and got made fun of by the other kids. I didn't so much because I was in a weird position where I was one of the nerdy kids. Like, I was friends with all them and loved the same things they do, but I was also, you know, an athlete. I was a baseball player,
Right.
so I was in that group too. So I kind of was like the bridge between the two, and everyone who'd seen me play hockey knew I could fight. So, so they were all like, okay, let's leave him alone.
I was not that lucky. I hit a growth spurt towards the end of my junior high days. So I went from like 5'6" to like 6'3" in like a year and a half.
Yeah, I had that in high school where I was always tall. But I went from like 6'2", like maybe 125 to 6'2", 180 in a year.
So, but the problem is I grew up, but not out.
I grew up and then out.
So for a long time, I was skinny as a rail, this tall, lanky kid with glasses and short hair running around in like, you know, obituary t-shirts. It really threw people for a fucking loop.
Yeah. Whereas I was always the tall kid, and then I broadened out a lot. And like, you know, because I ended up coming out of high school around 190.
Yeah,
and I wasn't a fat 190.
I don't even think I was that heavy when I came out of high school.
And then when I was on active duty, I was in shape, dude. I was at like 215, at like 3% body fat. No, not that cut, but I would go to the gym like 3 hours a day,
right?
Just because I was in the infantry. We don't have a job unless we have like a working party or we're training or something. We don't have a job, so when we're on base, what we learned very early on in our careers is, if you go to the gym, they won't mess with you and they won't call you for working parties and stuff. So like, you know, if they need guys for a detail or whatever, they'll be like, oh, hey, they'll just text you and be like, oh, hey, what are you doing right now? I'm like, oh, I'm in the gym. I'm like, oh, cool. Never mind. So like, you know, we were all in really good shape, but no, man, like I love the metal and like, you know, this fellowship we've built here, or that, you know, the YouTube community has built, has just been like, you get people from all over the places with all different knowledges, all different skills, all different stuff, and we all come to the same place and just talk about it from different perspectives, and it's great. But
it is. Everybody's got their own story to tell.
Yeah, and everybody's got their own take on things too, and like two people are not always going to see the same things the same way, and that's why I love doing this.
I think I've already said to you, there's going to be a time I'm going to either like or dislike a band. You're going to be like, bro.
Yeah. And like,
because I'm also one of those people who like, and this drove some people in the local scene nuts. I have no problem saying a band sucks.
Yeah.
Whether they're playing right in front of me or someone's playing an album from, like, yeah, no, that sucks.
Yeah. Right.
You know, if it's a band playing live, it's like, yeah, I can appreciate what they're doing because I can't, but I just don't like what they're doing.
Yeah. It's like, I appreciate you showing up and having the guts to get on stage and play, but I don't really like what you're playing.
Yeah.
Like, I get that with Creator. Like, I am not a Creator fan at all. Like, I've never.
But you like Sodom.
Yep. I don't know what it is, but Creator, like, I've seen them live when they opened for Sabaton.
Have you heard like their older stuff?
Yeah, I just don't gravitate towards it. I don't know what it is. I may need to give them another spin, but it's just like, for whatever they're doing, I just don't really get it. Like, I don't hate them, but I'm just not really a fan.
Well, that's like me with Destruction. Seen them live, you know, they are, you know, one of the godfathers of speed metal and thrash metal, but after a certain point, it's like,
it's like, okay, you're there.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't hate you, but, you know, you're not really my thing. But no, I mean, we could go on about this all day, but I actually have to run in a little bit here. So I think we're going to close this one out.
Right on.
And thanks for coming on, man. We'll have to do this again.
Anytime, man. Anytime.
And next time, I think we'll be doing. Next time I have this guy on, I think we'll be doing Bathory's for a couple of records, because if this started black metal, Bathory defined it in so many ways, and we will definitely get into that. But thanks for coming on, man, and thank you, chat, for being here. You guys have been great. Imperitus, you got anything coming up you want to plug?
Yeah, I do believe on May 2nd, I will be on that 70s Rock Fans channel, if all goes well. And we will be talking, as he put it, about the metal gods. Bands like Led Zeppelin, Iron Maiden, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, Judas Priest. So that should be a very good conversation. I always enjoy talking to him with music.
Oh, he's great. Yeah, he's a great guy to stream with, and just a great guy in general.
Yeah.
But no, well, I'll talk to 70s and see if I can jump in on that, because that's right where I live.
Yeah, that should be a great conversation. I'm sure you and me will get some more stuff going. Me and Nick have talked about a couple things. We just gotta organize. Like, my work schedule is goofy at this point.
Yeah, I just started a new job, so I'm still kind of figuring out the schedule and all
Yeah,
that,
I work at a
working things
grocery
around it.
store in the warehouse, and well, trucks don't show up, I don't work.
Yeah, fair enough.
But it turns out, like, oh, hey, truck didn't come today. All right, but it's coming tomorrow.
Yep.
So it's like, oh, I might have Wednesday off this week, but in reality, I have Tuesday off.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to plan stuff. I just made that comment to Comics Division because he's like, "Oh, what day are you going to be doing your show?" I'm like, I have no set day for doing anything because I can't. Because I can't.
Yeah. Right.
I never know if I'm going to get my schedule shifted around at a moment's notice.
Yeah, that's hard to do. And I just try to, and with me, I'm talking to people from all over the web. So I like, different time zones and stuff like that. I always have to work out when I'm going to do it and what days I can and can't. Like, especially when I wasn't working, it was easy because I can just be like, oh yeah, I can do it that time.
Yeah.
But now that I have a full-time job, I need to like shift most things to the weekends.
Oh, that works for me because I'm always off on Sundays because my company's cheap and they don't want to pay me the Sunday differential.
Fair.
So
very fair. All right, man. But I left the link down in the description to Imperitus' channel. You should definitely go check him out. And we can usually catch him on Foul Ball Productions on MF for Cocktail Lounge.
Yeah, usually on
Friday Night Tights if you're still awake. Obviously, I'll have more stuff coming on. I don't have an episode planned for next week, but I'll probably have it sometime this week. We're just working out times. So if you guys follow me on Gilded, I'll have it up on there. I left the link to my Gilded server down there if you want to join me on there. And this has been great. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
I will tell you what
putting up with us lunatics, discussing.
Yeah, thanks for listening to us ramble on about heavy metal for 2 hours. Yeah. With that being said, stay healthy, stay safe. I love you all, and I'll catch you next time.